Get off my property, old woman, before I call the cops on you. Eleanor Crawford stood on the porch of the home she had lived in for 53 years, watching a stranger slam her own front door in her face. Inside, she could see them eating at her table, sitting in her husband's chair, laughing in the living room where she had scattered his ashes 3 years ago. She was 76 years old, alone. Her husband was dead, her sister was dead, and now the only thing she had left her home belonged to strangers who had stolen it while she was at a funeral. If you believe in justice and unexpected heroes, subscribe now and follow this story to the very end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The taxi driver kept glancing at Eleanor through the rearview mirror. Ma'am, you sure this is the right address? Eleanor didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat had closed up the moment she saw the black truck in her driveway. The truck that didn't belong to her. The truck she had never seen before in her life. Ma'am, Yes, she whispered. This is my home. She paid him with trembling hands and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The November air bit into her skin, but she barely felt it. All she could feel was the wrongness radiating from her own house like poison. The curtains were different, dark, heavy things that blocked out all the light. Henry had picked those blue curtains himself 20 years ago, said they reminded him of the Texas sky in spring. Now they were gone. Eleanor's legs felt like water as she walked up the path she had walked 10,000 times before. The path Henry had laid with his own hands, brick by brick, the summer after they got married. The front door opened before she could knock. A man stepped out, tall shaved head tattoos crawling up his neck like vines. He held a beer bottle in one hand and a cigarette in the other. His eyes swept over Eleanor the way a wolf looks at a rabbit. Help you. This is my house. The words came out before Eleanor could stop them. I'm Eleanor Crawford. I've lived here for 53 years. Who are you? What are you doing in my home? The man took a long drag of his cigarette, blew the smoke directly into her face. Name's Victor. Victor Sloan. And this ain't your house anymore, Grandma. Eleanor's heart stopped. What are you talking about? Of course it's my house. I have the deed. You abandoned it. Victor shrugged like he was discussing the weather. Left it sitting empty. We moved in. Possession is 9/10 of the law in Texas. Maybe you should have thought about that before you took off. Abandoned, Eleanor's voice cracked. I was at my sister's funeral. She died. I was gone 2 weeks. 2 weeks is a long time. Victor smiled. It was the coldest thing Eleanor had ever seen. Things change. You can't do this. You can't just take someone's home. Already did. He gestured behind him with the beer bottle. Got my stuff inside, got my people inside, got mail coming to this address. Far as the law's concerned, this is my residence now. Eleanor grabbed his arm. Please, please, you don't understand. My husband is buried here. His ashes are in the garden. I scattered them myself 3 years ago. I can't leave him. I can't. Victor yanked his arm away. Not my problem, Grandma. I'll call the police. Go ahead, he laughed. They've already been here twice. Told us there's nothing they can do. Something about due process, eviction proceedings, all that legal stuff. He leaned closer and Eleanor could smell the beer on his breath. Face it, old lady. You lost. Now get off my property before I call the cops on you for trespassing. He slammed the door in her face. Eleanor stood there frozen, the door she had painted blue with Henry. The door he had carried her through on their wedding night. The door that had welcomed friends, family, and strangers for over half a century. Closed to her, forever. Her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the porch steps, clutching her chest, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Inside, she could hear laughter, music, the sounds of life happening in her home without her. Victor Sloan watched the old woman through the window. She's still out there. Janice appeared beside him, lighting her own cigarette. Crying on the steps. Pathetic. You were hard on her. Had to be. Victor turned away from the window. These old ones, they fight if you give them hope. You gotta crush that right away. Make them understand there's nothing they can do. Janice nodded slowly. She'd been running with Victor for 3 years now. Watched him pull the same con in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana. Always the same targets. Elderly, alone, vulnerable. Houses worth money, owners worth nothing. How long before we flip this one? Month, maybe two. Got a developer interested in the land? Some company wants to build condos. Victor grabbed another beer from the refrigerator, Eleanor's refrigerator. This is the biggest score yet. House is worth 400 grand easy. Land's worth even more. And the old lady? She'll give up, they always do. He popped the cap off his beer. By the time the courts sort everything out, we'll be long gone. New state, new identity, new Mark. Marcus walked in from the back bedroom. Young guy, early 20s, more muscle than brains. Yeah, there's a bunch of old photos in the closet. Some jewelry, too. Worth anything. Jewelry, yeah, grab it. Photos, toss them. There's also this. Marcus held up a small metal box. Locked. Victor took it, weighing it in his hand. Probably her dead husband's stuff. Might be cash inside. We'll crack it open later. He tossed the buck onto the counter like it was garbage. Outside, Eleanor finally stopped crying. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. Miami, Cedar Ridge Police Department. What's your emergency? Someone stole my house. Eleanor's voice was raw, broken. I came home and there are strangers living inside. They won't let me in. They threw me out of my own home. Ma'am, can you give me the address? Eleanor gave it. Gave everything. Her name, her husband's name, her social security number, the color of her bathroom tiles, anything that might prove this was her home. We'll send a deputy out, ma'am, fam, but I should let you know, if they've established residency, this might be a civil matter. Civil matter, Eleanor couldn't breathe. They broke into my house. I understand, ma'am. The deputy will explain everything. Deputy Tom Hendricks arrived 19 minutes later. He was a good man. Eleanor could see it in his eyes the moment he stepped out of his patrol car. The kind of man who still believed in right and wrong, even after 20 years of seeing the worst humanity had to offer. Mrs. Crawford, he approached her gently like she might shatter. I'm Deputy Hendricks. Can you tell me what happened? Eleanor told him everything. The funeral, the trip to Oklahoma, the 2 weeks of grief and paperwork and saying goodbye to the only sister she had left, and then coming home to find her life stolen. Hendricks listened without interrupting. His face grew darker with every word. And they just moved in while you were gone. 3 days after I left. My neighbor saw them. She thought I'd sold the house. Hendricks looked at the door. Victor was watching them through the window, smirking like he owned the world. Stay here, Mrs. Crawford. He walked up to the porch and knocked. Victor opened the door with exaggerated slowness. Deputy Hendricks, we meet again. Mr. Sloan, Mrs. Crawford says this is her residence and you've illegally occupied it. Illegally? Victor clutched his chest in mock offense. We found an abandoned property and moved in. That's not illegal, that's smart. She has the deed to this house. And I have mail with its address on it. Utility bills in my name. A lease agreement, I sign it with myself as landlord and tenant. Everything nice and legal. Victor's smile widened. Your own department told me there's nothing you can do. Remember, Hendricks's jaw tightened. Things can change. But they won't. Victor leaned against the doorframe. This is Texas deputy, castle doctrine, squatters' rights, all that good stuff your lawmakers put in place to protect property owners. He spread his arms. And I'm the property owner now. You're a thief. Prove it. They stared at each other for a long moment. Hendricks wanted nothing more than to drag this man out of the house and throw him in a cell. But Victor was right. The law was on his side, the law that Hendricks had sworn to uphold. He turned and walked back to Eleanor. Mrs. Crawford, I'm so sorry, but right now there's nothing I can do. Nothing, Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. He's established residency, changed the locks, got his name on the utilities. To remove him, you'll need to file for eviction. Go through the courts. How long will that take? Hendricks hesitated. Could be months, maybe longer. Months, Eleanor grabbed his arm. I'm 76 years old. I have nowhere to go. My husband's ashes are in that garden. Do you understand his ashes? And that monster is... Her voice broke completely. The tears she'd been fighting finally won. Hendricks put his hand on her shoulder. Is there anyone you can stay with, family, friends? My sister just died. She was my only family. Eleanor wiped her eyes with shaking hands. I have nobody. What about your neighbor, the one who saw them move in? Eleanor thought of Clara Bennett, sweet Clara who brought her casseroles after Henry died, who checked on her every Sunday to make sure she was still breathing. Maybe, she whispered, maybe she can help. Hendricks nodded. Go to her. Stay safe. I'm going to do some digging on Mr. Sloan. Something about him doesn't sit right with me. Will you find something? I don't know. He looked back at the house at Victor's silhouette in the window. But I'm going to try. That night, Eleanor slept in her car. She couldn't face Clara. Couldn't face the pity, the questions, the awkward silences. Not yet. She needed time to process what had happened. Time to figure out what to do next. She parked across the street from the Cedar Ridge Community Church, the same church where she and Henry had gotten married 54 years ago. The same church where she'd held his funeral 3 years ago. The parking lot was empty, the building dark. But Eleanor could still see it in her mind the way it had looked that summer day in 1970 when a nervous young mechanic had promised to love her forever. He kept that promise. Every single day until cancer stole him from her. Oh, Henry, she whispered into the darkness. What do I do now? No answer came, just the wind rattling her windows and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out the photograph she always carried, faded, now worn soft from years of handling. But she could still see every detail. Henry standing in front of their garage, grease on his hands, that crooked smile on his face. And around him, 6 men on motorcycles. Rough-looking men with leather vests and long hair and tattoos, the kind of men most people cross the street to avoid. But they weren't scary in this picture. They were laughing. Henry had his arm around the youngest one, a skinny kid with hollow eyes and cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. On the back of the photo, Henry had written, "The Boys, Summer 2009. Rex finally smiled." Rex, she remembered him now. The quiet one who never talked, never made eye contact, never let anyone get close. Henry had called him Grizzly, said the kid looked like a bear that had been poked too many times. Whatever happened to him, to any of them, they used to come through Cedar Ridge every spring, stop at Henry's garage to get their bikes tuned up. Eleanor would make lemonade and sandwiches, and they'd sit in the shade and talk for hours. They called her Mama Ellie, said she was the mother most of them never had. But that was years ago, before Henry got sick, before the world changed, before she became a 76-year-old woman sleeping in her car because strangers had stolen her home. Eleanor pressed the photograph against her heart and closed her eyes. Sleep came eventually, restless and cold, but it came. Victor Sloan couldn't sleep. He stood in Eleanor's bedroom, his bedroom now staring at the wedding photo on the nightstand. Eleanor and Henry young and happy, their whole lives ahead of them. He picked up the frame and studied it. 53 years, he muttered. 53 years in one house. Same man, same woman, same boring life. He couldn't imagine it. Couldn't imagine staying anywhere for 53 days, let alone 53 years. His whole life had been movement. Running from foster homes, running from the law, running from anyone who got too close. This house was just another stop. Another score. Another step toward the retirement he'd been chasing since he was 15 years old. But something about the old woman bothered him. The way she'd looked at him, not with fear, not with anger, but with something else. Something that made him feel things he didn't want to feel. You're getting soft, he told himself. He threw the photo in the trash and walked out of the room. Morning came gray and cold. Eleanor woke to the sound of tapping on her car window. Her neck screamed in protest as she turned to see who it was. Clara Bennett's face filled the window, a mixture of fury and concern fighting for dominance. Eleanor Crawford! Clara's voice was muffled but clear. What in God's name are you doing sleeping in your car? Eleanor fumbled with the door handle. Her fingers were stiff from the cold, barely functional. Clara, I didn't want to bother. Bother. Clara yanked the door open and practically dragged Eleanor out. I've been worried sick. I saw those people in your house, and I tried calling, but your phone went straight to voicemail, and I thought maybe you'd had a heart attack or been kidnapped or my phone died. Then you come to me. You don't sleep in a parking lot like some kind of homeless person. Clara, Eleanor's voice broke. I am homeless. The words hung in the air between them. Clara's face went through several expressions before settling on something fierce and protective. No, she said firmly. No, you're not. You're coming to my house right now. We're going to have breakfast. And then we're going to figure out how to get those bastards out of your home. Clara's kitchen smelled like coffee and bacon. Normal smells. Safe smells. Eleanor sat at the table and tried to remember what normal felt like. Eat, Clara commanded, sliding a plate in front of her. You look like you haven't had a real meal in weeks. I haven't been hungry. I don't care. Eat anyway. Eleanor picked at the bacon. It tasted like cardboard, but she forced herself to chew and swallow. Clara needed to see her eat, needed to feel like she was helping. Now, Clara said, sitting across from her with her own cup of coffee, tell me everything, from the beginning. So Eleanor did. The funeral, the drive, the taxi, Victor Sloane's cold smile, Deputy Hendricks' apology, the legal nightmare she was facing. Clara listened in silence, her knuckles going white around her coffee cup. I knew something was wrong, she said when Eleanor finished. I saw them move in 3 days after you left. A truck pulled up, and these people just started unloading boxes. I thought you'd sold the house without telling anyone. You'd been talking about downsizing. I would never sell that house. Never. I know that now. God, Eleanor, I should have called the police immediately. I should have. It wouldn't have mattered. Eleanor stared at her untouched eggs. Victor says the law is on his side, and apparently it is. Then we change the law. We can't change the law, Clara. Then we find someone who doesn't care about the law. Eleanor looked up sharply. What do you mean? Clara didn't answer right away. She got up and walked to the living room where Eleanor's salvaged belongings sat in garbage bags. Most of it was ruined clothes, soaked from rain books, torn apart photo albums, destroyed. Victor's crew had shown no mercy. Your neighbor boy Marcus helped me collect these, Clara said. Deputy Hendricks asked him to, before Victor could throw them away. Marcus is one of them. One of Victor's people. I know. But he looked uncomfortable, like he knew what they were doing was wrong but didn't know how to stop it. Clara rifled through one of the bags. Most of this is garbage now, but I found something. Something that might help. She pulled out a small metal box, the same box Victor had tossed on the counter like trash. Somehow it had ended up in the garbage bags with everything else. Eleanor's heart stopped. That's Henry's. I know. Clara handed it to her. It was locked, but the lock was rusted through. It opened right up. Eleanor's hands trembled as she took the box. She remembered this. Henry kept it in his nightstand drawer, never let her see inside. Said it was from his past life before her, before he became the man she loved. She opened it. Inside were letters of photographs, and at the very bottom, a stack of business cards held together by a rubber band so old it crumbled when she touched it. The first card made her blood freeze. Grizzly Morrison, Hell's Angels. When you need family, we're there. Below it was a phone number, handwritten, personal. Hell's Angels. Clara leaned over her shoulder. Those biker people, the ones on the new... Eleanor couldn't answer. She was staring at the back of the card where Henry had written something in his careful, precise handwriting, saved his life. He owes me everything. He'll never forget. Eleanor, Clara's voice was cautious now. Who is Grizzly Morrison? Eleanor's mind flashed back 30 years. A hot summer day, a skinny kid stumbling into Henry's garage on a motorcycle held together by duct tape and prayers. Hollow eyes, sunken cheeks. The look of someone who had given up on life. He was one of them, she said softly. The boys who used to come through town every spring. Henry fixed their bikes for free. I fed them, made them feel like human beings. She traced her finger over the phone number. Grizzly, he was the worst off. Running from something terrible. The law has passed himself. Henry never told me the details. But he took that boy in, gave him a bath, let him sleep in the back of the garage, fed him 3 meals a day until he got back on his feet. And now he's in the Hell's Angels. President, I think. At least that's what Henry said before he died. Eleanor looked at the photograph she'd been carrying, the young man with the haunted eyes. He looks so different now. So strong, but I can still see that scared kid underneath. Clara's eyes lit up with something dangerous. Eleanor, call him. What? Call him, right now. If this man owes Henry everything, then he owes you too. And something tells me the Hells Angels know how to handle people like Victor Sloan. Clara, I can't involve them. They're, they're, they're what criminals, outlaws. Clara grabbed Eleanor's hands. Eleanor, you're sleeping in your car while strangers destroy your home. Your husband's ashes are in that garden. Those criminals might be the only people who can help you. Eleanor stared at the phone number. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was crazy, absolutely crazy, but crazy was all she had left. Give me your phone, she said. So, the line rang 5 times. 6, 7. Eleanor was about to hang up when a voice answered, deep, rough like gravel being crushed under truck tires. Who's this? I'm looking for Rex Morrison. Grizzly. Silence. Then who's asking? My name is Eleanor Crawford. My husband was Henry Crawford. He was Henry Crawford. The voice changed instantly. The edge vanished, replaced by something young and vulnerable. Something Eleanor recognized. Henry Crawford from Cedar Ridge, the mechanic. Yes, that's right. Another pause, longer this time. When Grizzly spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Ma'am, this is Rex. Is Henry okay? Eleanor closed her eyes. Henry passed away 3 years ago, Rex, cancer. He fought hard, but she couldn't finish. The silence on the other end was deafening. I didn't know. Grizzly's voice cracked. I lost track. Things got complicated. I always meant to call, meant to visit, but he trailed off. How did he go? Was it peaceful? It was peaceful. He was at home in his own bed, holding my hand. Eleanor wiped a tear from her cheek. He talked about you at the end, about all the boys, said you were proof that everyone deserves a second chance. That sounds like Henry. Grizzly laughed, but there was no humor in it, just pain. Ma'am, he was the only person who ever believed in me. Only person who ever looked at me like I was worth something. He saw what you could become, what you did become. Because of him. Everything I am is because of him. Another pause. But Mrs. Crawford, I'm guessing you didn't call after all these years just to tell me about Henry. What's wrong? Eleanor told him everything. Victor Sloan, the squatters, the police, the lawyers, the nightmare that had consumed her life in just 48 hours. She told him about sleeping in her car, about Clara taking her in, about finding his card in Henry's lockbox. As she spoke, she could hear Grizzly's breathing change. Harder, faster, like a storm building on the horizon. When she finished, the silence stretched for a long moment. Ma'am, Grizzly's voice was ice cold now, controlled, dangerous. Where exactly are you right now? I'm at my neighbor's house, Clara Bennett on Magnolia Lane. Stay there, don't go anywhere. Don't talk to Victor Sloan or any of his people. Can you do that? Yes, but I'm making some calls, and then I'm coming to Texas. Rex, you don't have to, ma'am. His voice cut through her protest like a blade. Your husband pulled me out of the gutter when I was 22 years old. He gave me a job when no one else would look at me. He fed me when I was starving. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And you? You made me lemonade. You called me son. You treated me like a human being when the whole world treated me like garbage. His voice broke slightly. Do you know what that meant to a kid who hadn't been anyone's son since he was 12 years old? Eleanor's tears were flowing freely now. I didn't realize, well, see, of course you didn't. That's what made it real. You weren't trying to fix me or save me. You were just being kind. Grizzly took a deep breath. I owe everything to you and Henry. Everything. And there is nothing I won't do to protect you. Thank you, Eleanor whispered. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you are back in your house where you belong. His voice hardened again. Now stay safe, Mama Ellie. Help is coming. The line went dead. Clara was staring at her with wide eyes. What did he say? Eleanor set down the phone, and her hands had stopped shaking for the first time in days. He's coming, him and whoever he can find. The Hells Angels are coming here to Cedar Ridge. Yes, Clara sat back in her chair processing. Then a slow smile spread across her face. Well, Victor Sloan, I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into. Victor Sloan was having a very good day. The developer had called that morning. David Chen from some real estate conglomerate in Dallas. He was interested in the property. Very interested. Already talking about bulldozing the house and putting up luxury condos. 400,000 for the land alone, Victor told Janice. Plus whatever we can strip from the house. Appliances, fixtures, that antique furniture in the bedroom. We're looking at 500,000 easy. Janice nodded, but her expression was troubled. The old woman made another phone call. So it was a long one, 15, maybe 20 minutes. And when she hung up, she wasn't crying anymore. Victor paused. What do you mean? She looked different, like someone had told her good news, like she had hope again. Hope is dangerous. Victor frowned. Did you find out who she called? Long distance number, couldn't trace it. Victor drummed his fingers on the counter. This wasn't how it usually went. Usually by now, the Marks had collapsed completely, accepted defeat, started looking for somewhere else to live. But Eleanor Crawford was still fighting, still hoping, still believing someone would save her. Get Marcus to watch her neighbor's house, he said. I want to know everyone who comes and goes, everyone she talks to, everything she does. You're worried. I'm careful. There's a difference. He finished his beer and crushed the can. This is the biggest score of our lives. I'm not letting some 70-year-old grandmother ruin it. 3 days passed. Eleanor stayed at Clara's house trying to keep busy, cooking meals neither of them could eat, watching television neither of them could focus on, waiting for a phone call that never came. Maybe he changed his mind, she said on the third morning. Maybe he realized it was too much trouble. He wouldn't do that. Clara shook her head firmly. Not after what you told me. Not after what Henry did for him. That was 30 years ago, Clara. People change. Not about something like this. Eleanor wanted to believe her. Wanted to hold on to the hope that Grizzly had given her. But with each passing hour, that hope grew dimmer. And then on the morning of the fourth day, she heard it. A low rumble. Distant at first, like thunder rolling across the plains. But the sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. The rumble grew louder, closer, and suddenly Eleanor knew exactly what it was. She ran to the window. Clara was right behind her. Eleanor, what? Oh my God. Coming down Magnolia Lane was a wall of chrome and thunder. 12 motorcycles in perfect formation, moving with military precision. The morning sun caught their chrome and leather, turning them into something out of a legend. Neighbors appeared on porches and windows and doorways, staring, whispering, clutching their phones. At the front of the pack was a massive man on an even bigger bike. Gray in his beard now, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 30 years ago. But Eleanor recognized him immediately. The haunted boy had become a force of nature. Grizzly Morrison had come home. Eleanor was out the door before Clara could stop her. The motorcycles rolled to a stop in front of her house. One by one, the riders dismounted. 12 men in leather vests, each one bearing the same patches. Hellsangels, the winged skull, death's head, symbols that made most people run the other way. But Eleanor ran toward them. Grizzly was the last to get off his bike. He stood there for a moment, staring at the frail woman walking toward him across the lawn. Then he moved. They met in the middle of the street. He was bigger than she remembered. Taller, broader, solid as a mountain. The hollow cheeks had filled out. The haunted eyes had hardened into something fierce and protective. But when he looked at her, really looked at her, she could still see the scared kid underneath. Mama Ellie, his voice was rough, broken. You came, she whispered. You actually came. I told you I would. He reached out and took her hand so gently it made her heart ache. I'm sorry it took so long. I had to make some arrangements. Arrangements! He gestured behind him at the 11 men standing in formation. Brought some friends. Hope you don't mind. Eleanor looked at them. They were terrifying, massive, covered in tattoos and scars and the evidence of hard lives. The kind of men mothers warned their children about. And they were all looking at her with something that looked almost like reverence. Are these my brothers? Grizzly said. Every one of them knows your husband's name, knows what he did for me, knows what you did. He squeezed her hands. They volunteered Mama Ellie, every single one of them. When I told them what happened, they dropped everything and rode through the night to get here. Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Grizzly pulled her into a hug. It was gentle, almost reverent, like he was holding something precious, something sacred. You just have to let us help. Behind them, one of the bikers stepped forward. Older man, gray ponytail face like carved granite. Is that the house? He asked, nodding toward 414 Magnolia Lane. That's it, Grizzly confirmed, releasing Eleanor. Target's name is Victor Sloan, got at least 3 others inside within. They've been here almost 3 weeks. What's the play? Grizzly looked at Eleanor. We do this clean, Mama Ellie. No violence unless they start it. I promise you that. I don't want anyone to get hurt. Nobody's getting hurt, except maybe their pride. He turned to his brothers. Let's go have a conversation. Victor Sloan saw them coming. He was standing by the window drinking his morning coffee from Eleanor's favorite mug when the sound hit him. That unmistakable rumble that meant only one thing. Janice, he said quietly, we have a problem. She appeared beside him, looked out the window and went pale. Holy hell. Get Marcus. Get everyone. What are we supposed to do against that? Victor didn't answer. He was watching the bikers dismount, watching them form up like an army, watching the huge one with the gray beard hug the old woman like she was his own mother. And for the first time in his professional career, Victor Sloan felt something he hadn't felt in years, fear. The knock on the door echoed through the house like a gunshot. Victor took a deep breath, composed himself, put on the same smug mask he always wore. He opened the door. Grizzly Morrison filled the doorway like a force of nature. Behind him, 11 men stood in silent formation across the lawn. Mr. Sloan, Grizzly's voice was calm, almost friendly. My name is Rex Morrison. I believe you've been living in my friend's house. This is my house, Victor said automatically. You have nothing. Grizzly cut him off without raising his voice. What you have is stolen property, a criminal record in 3 states in about 30 seconds to make a very important decision. Victor's mask slipped for just a moment. How do you know about? I know everything, Victor. I know about Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana. I know about the elderly couples you've terrorized, the lives you've destroyed, the homes you've stolen. Grizzly stepped closer and Victor instinctively stepped back. Did you really think you could do this forever? Did you really think no one would ever fight back? The law is on my side. The law is a slow old man in a wheelchair. I'm something else entirely. Victor felt his crew gathering behind him, 4 people total, including himself, against 12 bikers who looked like they'd been raised in hell itself. You can't touch me, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. If you lay one finger on me, I'll have you arrested for assault. I'll sue you for everything you have. You'll do nothing. Grizzly smiled, and it was terrifying. Because here's what you don't understand, Victor. We haven't broken any laws. We're standing on public property, exercising our right to free assembly. Everything we've done is perfectly legal. Then what's the point? The point is we're not leaving. We're going to stand on this lawn day and night for as long as it takes. We're going to watch everything you do, document everything you sell, track everywhere you go. Grizzly leaned in close. And we're going to make sure every buyer, every dealer, every fence in a 5-state radius knows exactly who you are and what you've done. Victor's blood ran cold. You can't. Already did. Grizzly pulled out his phone and showed Victor a screen full of messages. Started making calls 3 days ago. Every pawn shop, every used furniture dealer, every real estate developer who's ever done business with you. They all know your name now, your face, your methods, and they all know what happens to people who help you. David Chen, Victor whispered, backed out this morning. Grizzly pocketed his phone. Face it, Victor. Your network is gone. Your buyer is gone. Your escape route is gone. The only thing you have left is a choice. What choice? Grizzly stepped back and gestured toward the street. Walk out that door right now. Take your people, take your truck and leave. Never come back to Texas. Never target another elderly person again. And we let you go. And if I don't, then we stay here. Week after week, month after month, making your life a living hell while the courts slowly grind through the eviction process. By the time it's over, you'll have nothing left. No buyers for the stuff you stole, no developers interested in the land, no way to profit from any of this. Grizzly's eyes were cold. You'll have wasted months of your life, destroyed your reputation, and ended up with exactly nothing. All because you chose to steal from the wrong little old lady. Victor looked at Janice, at Marcus, at the others. They were already backing away, already calculating their odds, already reaching the same conclusion he was. They couldn't win this. "Half an hour," Victor said finally. "We need half an hour to pack." "You have 20 minutes. Grizzly checked his watch. "Starting now." It took them 18. Eleanor watched from Clara's porch as Victor and his crew loaded their belongings into the black truck. They moved quickly, silently avoiding eye contact with the bikers who stood like statues on the lawn. When they were done, Victor walked toward his truck without looking back. But at the last moment he stopped, turned, met Eleanor's eyes across the distance. "This isn't over," he said quietly, quietly enough that only she could hear. Then he got in his truck and drove away. Grizzly appeared beside Eleanor. "What did he say?" "Nothing." Eleanor shook her head. "Nothing important." Grizzly watched the truck disappear around the corner. His expression was unreadable. "I'll have someone keep an eye on him. Make sure he doesn't try anything stupid. You've already done so much. I haven't done anything yet." Grizzly reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Eleanor's keys, the ones Victor had changed the locks with. "These belong to you." He placed them in her hand. Eleanor stared at them. Such small things, just metal and teeth. But they represented everything she'd lost, everything she'd almost lost forever. "I'm home," she whispered. "You're home," Grizzly confirmed, "and we're going to make sure it stays that way." The house was a disaster. Eleanor walked through the rooms she'd known for 53 years, and she barely recognized them. Furniture moved or missing, walls scuffed and dirty, her belongings scattered, broken, thrown away like trash. But she was home, and that was all that mattered. Grizzly walked beside her, his expression growing darker with every room they entered. "We'll fix all of this," he said, "every last bit of it." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." He stopped in front of the window that faced the backyard. "The garden. Is that where—" Eleanor nodded. "His ashes. I scattered them there the day after the funeral. He always loved that garden." Grizzly was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick. "I should have been there, at the funeral. I should have. You're here now, that's what matters." He turned to face her, and for a moment she saw the scared kid again. The one who'd stumbled into Henry's garage 30 years ago looking for a reason to keep living. "I never told you what he did for me," Grizzly said softly. "Not really. The full story. You don't have to. I want to." He took a deep breath. "When I met Henry, I was running from murder charges. Not guilty. I was framed by guys I used to run with. But I couldn't prove it, and no one would believe me. I was 22 years old, exhausted, starving, pretty sure I was going to die on the road." Eleanor felt her heart break. "Henry never told me that." "He wouldn't. That's who he was." Grizzly smiled sadly. "He didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just looked at me and said, 'Kid, you look like you could use a meal, and about you any good with engines.' And that was it. He took me in, fed me, gave me work, let me sleep in his garage when I had nowhere else to go. I remember you stayed for almost a year. Best year of my life up to that point." Grizzly's voice cracked. "And you treated me like a person, like I mattered. Do you know how long it had been since anyone had done that, since anyone had made me feel like I was worth something?" Eleanor reached up and touched his face, the same face that had once been so hollow, so hopeless. Now it was strong, full of life, full of purpose. "You were always worth something, Rex. Henry just helped you see it." "No," Grizzly shook his head. "You both did. And I've spent the last 30 years trying to live up to what you saw in me." He took her hand and squeezed. "I'm not going to fail you now, Mama Ellie. Whatever you need for as long as you need it, I'm here. We're all here." Eleanor pulled him into a hug. This strong, fierce man who had once been a broken boy. This leader of outlaws who still remembered the taste of her lemonade. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for coming back. He said. We sirs. Outside, the other bikers had already started working. One was unloading tools from his saddlebag. Another was examining the damaged mailbox. A third was picking up trash from the lawn. Clara Bennett stood on her own porch watching in amazement. Well, I never, she muttered to herself. I never in all my years. One of the bikers walked over to her. Younger man, maybe 35, with kind eyes that didn't match his rough exterior. Ma'am, you wouldn't happen to have a lawnmower we could borrow? The grass is getting pretty high. Clara blinked. You're going to mow her lawn? Yes, ma'am, and fix her windows and repaint her walls, whatever Mama Ellie needs. Mama Ellie. Clara felt tears pricking her eyes. That's what you call her. That's who she is. The biker smiled. To all of us. He turned and walked back to join the others, leaving Clara with her hand pressed against her heart. Through the window, she could see Eleanor and Grizzly standing in the living room talking softly. The frail widow and the massive biker. An unlikely pair who were somehow exactly what each other needed. Maybe the world wasn't as broken as she'd thought. Maybe there was still kindness out there. Still loyalty, still love. Maybe all you had to do was plant the seeds and wait for them to grow. That night, Eleanor slept in her own bed for the first time in weeks. The sheets had been changed. The bikers had bought new ones, refused to let her pay. The house smelled like cleaning supplies and fresh paint. One of them had even fixed the squeak in the bedroom door that had been bothering her for years. Through her window, she could see the shapes of motorcycles parked on the lawn, hear the quiet murmur of voices as the men took turns keeping watch. They weren't leaving, not until they were sure she was safe. Eleanor reached over and picked up the photograph from her nightstand, the one of Henry with the boys, the one that had started all of this. You knew, she whispered to his smiling face. You knew they'd come back someday. That's why you kept that card. No answer came, but Eleanor felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a peace she hadn't felt since Henry died. She was home, she was safe, and she was loved. That was enough. Outside, Grizzly stood alone at the edge of the property, staring at the garden where Henry's ashes had been scattered. I'm sorry I wasn't there, he said quietly. At the end, I should have been there. The wind rustled through the trees. The stars burned silently overhead. But I'm here now, and I promise you, Henry, I promise you on everything I am, no one will ever hurt her again. Not while I'm still breathing. He stood there for a long time, communing with the ghost of the man who had saved his life. Then he walked back to join his brothers. There was still work to do. 50 miles away, Victor Sloan sat in a roadside motel room, staring at his phone. The call had come through an hour ago from someone he'd hoped never to hear from again. You failed, the voice had said. You promised me that property. You promised me that land. And now you've lost it to a bunch of bikers. They caught me off guard. It won't happen again. No, it won't. Because you're going to fix this, Victor, one way or another. The line had gone dead. Victor stared at the wall, his mind racing. The Hells Angels thought they'd won, thought they'd chased him away forever. They were wrong. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Martinez, it's Victor. I need a lawyer, the best you've got. He smiled coldly at his reflection in the dark window. This isn't over, not by a long shot. The call came at 6:47 the next morning. Eleanor was making coffee in her own kitchen for the first time in weeks when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but something in her gut told her to answer. Mrs. Crawford. The voice was smooth, professional, the kind of voice that belonged in expensive suits and corner offices. My name is Raymond Martinez. I'm an attorney representing Mr. Victor Sloan. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. What do you want? I want to inform you that my client intends to pursue legal action against you for unlawful eviction, harassment, and conspiracy to commit assault. You have until 5 o'clock this evening to vacate the property at 414 Magnolia Lane, or we will be forced to seek an emergency injunction. Vacate, Eleanor gripped the counter to steady herself. This is my home. I have the deed. You have nothing, Mrs. Crawford. Martinez's voice hardened. What you have is a group of known criminals who threatened my client with violence and forced him to leave under duress. That's witness intimidation. That's assault. And in the state of Texas, that's a felony. They didn't touch him. They didn't. 12 gang members surrounded my client's residence. They made explicit threats. They destroyed his business relationships. All of this is documented, Mrs. Crawford. All of it will be presented to a judge. Martinez paused. 5 o'clock. I suggest you start packing. The line went dead. Eleanor stood frozen, the phone still pressed against her ear. The coffee pot beeped behind her, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Grizzly found her like that 5 minutes later. Mama Ellie, he crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, his massive frame filling the doorway. What happened? Who was on the phone? Eleanor told him. Word for word, every threat, every accusation, every piece of the nightmare that had just crashed back into her life. Grizzly's face went dark, darker than she'd ever seen it. Martinez, Raymond Martinez. You know him. I know of him. Grizzly pulled out his own phone. He's a fixer, works for people who can afford to make problems disappear. If Victor's got him on retainer, this just got a lot more complicated. What do? We don't panic. Grizzly was already dialing. And we don't run. I know someone who can help. Eleanor watched him walk into the living room, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent. Through the window, she could see the other bikers stirring from their overnight watch. They looked tired but alert, ready for whatever came next. She'd thought it was over. She'd been so stupid to think it was over. Victor Sloan wasn't finished. He was just getting started. Deputy Tom Hendricks was at his desk when his partner dropped a folder in front of him. What's this? Hendricks looked up from his computer. Victor Sloan, everything I could find. Deputy Sarah Chen pulled up a chair. You were right, this guy's a professional. Hendricks opened the folder. Inside were printouts, photographs, court documents from 3 different states. His eyes widened as he read. Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, same pattern every time. Target elderly homeowners, move in while they're away, establish residency, tie them up in legal battles until they give up or die. He looked at Chen. How has nobody caught this guy? Because he's smart, uses different names, different crews, never stays in one place long enough to build a case. Chen pointed to a photograph. But look at this, same lawyer every time. Hendricks studied the image. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit shaking hands with Victor Sloan outside a courthouse in Little Rock. Raymond Martinez, Chen said, was disbarred in Louisiana, suspended in Arkansas, but somehow still practicing in Texas. How is that possible? Friends in high places. Martinez has connections to some very powerful people. Real estate developers, politicians, judges. Chen lowered her voice. There's a reason his cases always go his way, Tom. And it's not because he's a good lawyer. Hendricks felt his jaw tighten. So we're dealing with a corrupt system. We're dealing with a system that's been corrupted. There's a difference. Chen closed the folder. But I found something else. Something Martinez doesn't know about. What? Chen smiled. Victor Sloan has a warrant out for his arrest in Louisiana. Fraud charges. He skipped bail 3 years ago and disappeared. She slid another document across the desk. If we can get Louisiana to extradite, this whole thing falls apart. Hendricks stared at the warrant. His heart was pounding. How long? I've already made the calls. Could be days. Could be weeks. Bureaucracy moves slow. We don't have weeks. Hendricks grabbed his keys. I need to warn Mrs. Crawford, and I need to talk to those bikers. Isha. Grizzly was standing on Eleanor's porch when Hendricks pulled up. The deputy got out of his car, slowly, hands visible, posture non-threatening. He knew how this looked. A cop approaching a group of Hell's Angels was never a casual conversation. Deputy? Grizzly nodded. Didn't expect to see you back so soon. We need to talk. Hendricks climbed the porch steps. Is Mrs. Crawford inside? She's resting. The phone call this morning shook her up pretty bad. Martinez. Grizzly's eyes narrowed. You know him? I know enough. Hendricks glanced at the other bikers scattered across the lawn. They were watching him carefully but not aggressively, just waiting. I also know Victor Sloan has a warrant out in Louisiana. Fraud charges. He skipped bail. Grizzly was silent for a moment. Then can you arrest him? Not yet. Need to coordinate with Louisiana authorities. Could take time. How much time? Days, maybe weeks. We don't have weeks. Grizzly's voice was hard. Martinez is threatening to have us arrested for assault. Says we're a criminal gang that intimidated his client. Hendricks felt sick. That's ridiculous. I was here. You didn't touch anyone. Doesn't matter what happened. Matters what Martinez can make a judge believe. Grizzly pulled out his phone and showed Hendricks a text message. He's already filed for an emergency injunction. Hearings tomorrow morning. Hendricks read the message. His stomach dropped. Judge William Patterson. That's not good. Friend of Martinez. Golf buddy. They vacationed together in Cancun. Hendricks handed the phone back. This is rigged. The whole thing is rigged from the start. Tell me something I don't know. The front door opened. Eleanor stood there pale but composed. She'd heard everything. What do we do? She asked quietly. What can we possibly do against people like this? Hendricks and Grizzly exchanged a look. For a moment, neither of them had an answer. Then Grizzly spoke. We fight. Same way we always fight. Together. He turned to Hendricks. You said Victor has a warrant in Louisiana. What if we could make that warrant louder? What do you mean? I mean, what if Victor Sloan's face was on every news channel in Texas by tomorrow morning? What if every person in this state knew exactly who he was and what he'd done? Grizzly smiled coldly. Martinez can rig a courtroom, but he can't rig public opinion. Hendricks hesitated. This was dangerous territory. He was a deputy sworn to uphold the law. What Grizzly was suggesting skirted the edge of everything he believed in. But then he looked at Eleanor. 76 years old, alone, fighting for her home against a system designed to crush people like her. What do you need? He asked. Clara Bennett had never been on television before. She'd certainly never expected to be on television at 72 years old, standing on her neighbor's lawn, surrounded by Hell's Angels, telling a reporter from Channel 7 News about the most dramatic week of her life. They threw her belongings in the trash, Clara said, her voice shaking with anger. 53 years of memories, wedding photos, her husband's, things, everything. Just tossed in garbage bags like it meant nothing. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Tran, leaned in with her microphone. And the bikers, how did they get involved? Clara glanced at Grizzly, who stood nearby with his arms crossed. He gave her a small nod. Their family, Clara said simply. Eleanor's husband helped them years ago. When he was alive, he treated everyone with kindness. These men, they remembered. When they heard what happened to Eleanor, they came. Some would say the Hell's Angels are a dangerous organization. Weren't you afraid? Claire actually laughed. Afraid, honey, these men fixed Eleanor's house. They mowed her lawn. They bought her new sheets because the ones those criminals slept on were too dirty to wash. She pointed at the bikers on the lawn. You want to know what's dangerous? A 76-year-old woman sleeping in her car because the law couldn't protect her. That's dangerous. The interview went on for another 20 minutes. By the end, Jessica Tran had enough footage for a full segment, maybe more. This is going to be big, she told Grizzly before she left. My editor already wants it for the 6 o'clock news, and I've got calls into CNN, MSNBC, Fox. Everyone's going to want this story. Good, Grizzly shook her hand. Make sure they see Victor Sloan's face. Make sure everyone knows what he did. Oh, they will, Jessica smiled. Trust me. By tomorrow morning, Victor Sloan is going to be the most hated man in Texas. Victor Sloan saw the news segment at 6:14 p.m. He was sitting in his motel room eating a microwave dinner when Eleanor Crawford's face appeared on the screen. Then Clara Bennett. Then Grizzly Morrison. Then a parade of neighbors he'd never seen before, all telling the same story. The poor widow, the evil squatters, the heroic bikers who saved the day. This is bull, he muttered. This is complete bull. His phone rang. Martinez. You watching this? The lawyer asked. I'm watching. This is bad, Victor. Very bad. My contact at the courthouse just called. Judge Patterson is getting cold feet. Says he can't rule in our favor with cameras watching. Victor felt his blood pressure spike. You said you had him handled. I had him handled before this became a national news story. Now everyone's looking at Cedar Ridge. Everyone's asking questions. Martinez's voice was tight. We need to back off, regroup, wait for this to blow over. Back off. Victor threw his dinner against the wall. I've spent 3 weeks on this score. I've got $500,000 riding on that property. I'm not backing off because some old lady cried on television. Victor, listen to me. The Louisiana warrant is public now. They showed your mugshot on CNN. If you stay in Texas, you're going to get arrested. And this time I won't be able to help you. Victor was silent for a long moment. His mind was racing, calculating, searching for an angle. There had to be a way out. There was always a way out. What about the bikers? He asked. They threatened me. They destroyed my business. That's still a crime. It's not enough, not anymore. Public sympathy is completely on their side. Then we change the public sympathy. Victor picked up his keys. I'm coming to your office. We're going to figure this out. Victor, don't. He hung up before Martinez could finish. Nobody made Victor Sloan run. Nobody. He'd spent his whole life clawing his way up from nothing, taking what he needed, crushing anyone who got in his way. He wasn't about to let some bikers and an old woman destroy everything he'd built. He'd burn that house to the ground before he let them win. Eleanor was watching the news when she saw Victor's face, not on television, through her window, standing across the street staring at her house with an expression that made her blood freeze. Grizzly, she called, her voice barely above a whisper. Grizzly, he's here. The big man was at her side in seconds. He looked through the window and his whole body went rigid. Stay inside, he said. Lock the doors. What are you going to do? Grizzly didn't answer. He was already walking out the front door. Eleanor watched through the window as he crossed the lawn. The other bikers noticed immediately. They rose from their positions like shadows coming to life, forming up behind their president. Victor didn't move. He just stood there smiling that cold smile as 12 Hell's Angels approached him. You're not supposed to be here, Grizzly said. You're supposed to be Change my mind. Victor lit a cigarette. It's a free country, isn't it? I can stand on a public sidewalk if I want. What do you want, Victor? I want what's mine. Victor blew smoke into the evening air. That house, that land, the money I was promised. You think some news coverage is going to scare me off? You think I care what a bunch of housewives think about me? You should care. Grizzly stepped closer. Because those housewives vote. They serve on juries. They elect sheriffs and judges and district attorneys. And right now, every single one of them wants to see you in prison. Victor's smile flickered. Just for a moment. Then it was back colder than ever. You know what I think? I think you're bluffing. I think you've played your best card and you've got nothing left. He took a step toward Grizzly. You can't touch me. You can't arrest me. All you can do is stand there and watch while I tear your little old lady's life apart. Try it, Grizzly said softly. See what happens. Oh, I will. Victor tossed his cigarette onto the ground. This isn't over, Morrison, not by a long shot. I've destroyed better men than you. I've broken families, ruined lives, taken everything from people who thought they were untouchable. He leaned in close. Your precious Mama Ellie is next, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Grizzly stood there for a long moment watching him go. His hands were clenched into fists. Every muscle in his body screamed to chase that man down and end this once and for all. But he couldn't. Not like that. Not the way the old Grizzly would have. Henry Crawford had taught him better. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock the next morning. Eleanor barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Victor's words in her mind. This isn't over. I've destroyed better men than you. Your precious Mama Ellie is next. What had she gotten herself into? What had she dragged these men into? At 7, there was a knock on her bedroom door. Grizzly's voice. Mama Ellie, you need to see this. She got up and followed him to the living room. The television was on, tuned to CNN. Her face was on the screen. The story has gone viral, Grizzly said. Millions of views overnight. People are sharing it everywhere. Hashtag Justice for Ellie is trending on Twitter. Eleanor stared at the television. She saw herself frail and gray-haired standing on her own porch with Grizzly beside her. She saw Clara giving her interview. She saw the other bikers, these rough men who had become her unlikely protectors, working on her house with tools and ladders. And then she saw Victor Sloan's mugshot, the Louisiana warrant, the list of his crimes stretching back a decade. He's finished, Grizzly said quietly. Martinez can't save him now. No judge in Texas will rule in his favor, not with the whole country watching. But the hearing is going to be a formality. We've already won Mama Ellie. Victor just doesn't know it yet. Eleanor should have felt relieved. She should have felt triumphant. But all she felt was tired, so incredibly tired. What if he comes back, she asked. What if he tries something? He won't. Grizzly put his hand on her shoulder. And even if he does, we're not going anywhere, not until this is completely over. Eleanor looked up at him. This man who had once been a broken boy. This outlaw who had become her guardian angel. Why, she asked. Why are you doing all this for me? Grizzly was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down beside her, his massive frame making the couch creak. When I was 22 years old, I wanted to die. I've been running for so long, done so many things I'm ashamed of, hurt so many people. I thought there was nothing left for me. Nothing good anyway. He stared at his hands, big scarred hands that had done violence and known tenderness. Then I walked into Henry's garage, and for the first time in my life, someone looked at me like I was worth something, like I could be more than what I'd been. He met Eleanor's eyes. You and Henry gave me something I'd never had before. Hope, a reason to keep going, a belief that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't beyond saving. Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. You saved yourself, Rex. No. He shook his head firmly. You saved me, both of you, and I've spent the last 30 years trying to live up to that, trying to be the man Henry believed I could be. He took her hand gently. This isn't about repaying a debt, Mama Ellie. This is about family. You're my family. The only real family I've ever had, and I will burn the world down before I let anyone hurt you. Eleanor couldn't speak. She just held his hand and cried, 30 years of distance dissolving in a single moment. They sat there together until the sun came up. The hearing started at exactly 900 a.m. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every available seat, cameras lined the walls, and a crowd of supporters had gathered outside with signs reading, Justice for Ellie and Protect Our Elders. Judge William Patterson looked deeply uncomfortable as he took his seat. His eyes kept darting to the cameras, to the reporters, to the faces of the people who were watching his every move. Raymond Martinez rose first. He was wearing his most expensive suit, but there was sweat on his forehead. He could feel the tide turning against him. Your Honor, my client has been the victim of a coordinated campaign of harassment and intimidation. A violent motorcycle gang has... Objection! The voice came from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. A woman was walking down the aisle. Mid-50s, sharp features, steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She moved with the confidence of someone who had spent decades in courtrooms and never lost. Who are you? Judge Patterson demanded. Margaret Chen, attorney for Mrs. Eleanor Crawford. She reached the front of the room and set her briefcase on the table. And I have evidence that Mr. Martinez's client is a wanted fugitive with outstanding warrants in 3 states. The courtroom erupted. Grizzly watched from the gallery, a small smile playing on his lips. Margaret Chen was one of the best civil rights attorneys in Texas. She'd taken Eleanor's case pro bono after seeing the news coverage. Said she couldn't stand by while an elderly woman was victimized by a broken system. Martinez was objecting, demanding a recess, threatening sanctions. But it was too late. Margaret was already handing documents to the judge. Victor's criminal history, his pattern of elder abuse, the Louisiana warrant that proved everything. Judge Patterson read the documents in silence. His face grew paler with each page. Mr. Martinez, he finally said, is your client in this courtroom? Martinez hesitated. He is not, Your Honor. Do you know where he is? I know, Your Honor, I do not. The judge set down the papers. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. Mr. Martinez, I'm dismissing your client's claims with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm issuing a warrant for Victor Sloan's arrest on charges of fraud, trespassing, and elder abuse under Texas law. And I'm referring this matter to the state bar for review of your conduct. Martinez's face went white. Your Honor, I protest. Your protest is noted. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Eleanor was standing outside the courthouse when Grizzly found her. We won, she said as if she couldn't quite believe it. We actually won. We won, Grizzly confirmed. Victor's done. Martinez is done. It's over. But even as he said the words, something nagged at him. A feeling he couldn't shake. Victor's face in the darkness. That cold smile. This isn't over, Morrison. His phone buzzed. A text from one of his brothers. Victor spotted at a gas station 20 miles south. He's got a gas can. Grizzly's blood ran cold. Mama Ellie, he said carefully, I need you to stay here with Margaret. Can you do that? Eleanor looked at him with sudden fear. What's wrong? Nothing, just need to take care of something. He was already moving toward his bike, already calling his brothers. But deep in his gut, he knew. This wasn't over. Victor Sloan was coming back, and he was coming back to burn everything down. Victor filled the gas can with steady hands. The attendant gave him a strange look, but didn't say anything. People minded their own business in Texas. That was one of the things he'd always liked about this state. He paid in cash. No credit cards, no trail, just like the old days. As he walked back to his truck, his phone rang. Martinez. Don't do this, Victor. Whatever you're planning, don't do it. Do what? Victor smiled. I'm just going for a drive. The police are looking for you. There's a warrant. If you go anywhere near that house, then what? They'll arrest me. They're going to arrest me anyway, Martinez. At least this way I go out on my own terms. Victor, listen to me. No, you listen. Victor's voice went hard. I've spent my whole life taking what I want. Nobody's ever stopped me. Not the cops, not the courts, not anyone. And I'm not about to let some bikers and an old woman be the first. He hung up and climbed into his truck. The gas can sat on the passenger seat full and ready. 20 miles, that's all that stood between him and 414 Magnolia Lane. 20 miles and a lifetime of rage. Grizzly pushed his bike to the limit. The wind screamed past his face, the engine roaring beneath him. His brothers were behind him, a wall of chrome and fury tearing down the highway. Please, he thought, please let us get there in time. He'd lost too much in his life, made too many mistakes, hurt too many people. But Henry Crawford had given him a second chance. Eleanor had given him a family. He wasn't going to lose them now. Not to Victor Sloan, not to anyone. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen without slowing down. Victor's truck spotted on Magnolia Lane. He's heading for the house. Grizzly twisted the throttle harder. 5 miles, 4, 3. The smoke appeared on the horizon before he could see the flames. Eleanor's house was burning. Not all of it, not yet. But the garden shed was engulfed flames licking toward the main structure, smoke billowing into the evening sky. And in the middle of the lawn, Victor Sloan stood with an empty gas can watching it all burn. He turned when he heard the motorcycles. That cold smile was back, but there was something else in his eyes now, something broken, something final. You're too late, he called out. You're always too late. Grizzly jumped off his bike before it stopped moving. His brothers fanned out behind him, creating a semicircle around Victor. Step away from the house, Grizzly said. His voice was calm, deadly calm. Or what? You'll kill me, Victor laughed. Go ahead, do it, end this. That's not who I am anymore. No, Victor took a step towards him. Then what are you, Morrison? What are you without violence, without fear? You're nothing, just an old man pretending to be something he's not. Grizzly didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching the flames grow higher. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Hear that? Grizzly said. That's the police, fire department, the whole cavalry coming for you, Victor. You've got about 2 minutes before this place is surrounded. Victor's smile faltered. I don't care. Yeah, you do. Grizzly took a step forward. You care because you're a survivor. That's what you are, Victor. You serve it, you adapt. You find a way out. Another step. But there's no way out of this. Not anymore. You burned your last bridge when you lit that match. Victor looked at the flames, at the house, at the bikers surrounding him, and for the first time his mask cracked completely. I just wanted what was mine, he whispered. I just wanted what I deserved. You got exactly what you deserved, Grizzly said. Nothing. The first police car screeched to a stop, then another, then a fire truck siren screaming. Victor Sloan didn't run, didn't fight. He just stood there as the officers approached, hands at his sides, eyes empty. When they put the handcuffs on him, he didn't say a word. It was finally over. The fire was contained within 20 minutes. The shed was gone, but the house had survived. Smoke damaged some scorching on the exterior walls, but the structure was intact. Eleanor's home was still standing. She arrived just as the firefighters were finishing up. Clara was with her and Margaret Chen and what seemed like half the neighborhood. When she saw Grizzly standing on her lawn covered in soot, she ran to him. "Well, it's okay." He hugged her gently. "The house is okay. Victor's in custody. It's really over this time." Eleanor looked at her home, at the blackened garden where Henry's ashes lay, at the walls that had sheltered her for 53 years. "He tried to destroy it," she said quietly. "He tried to take everything. But he didn't." Grizzly turned her to face him. "You're still here. Your home is still here, and Henry," he gestured toward the garden, "Henry's still here too." Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of relief. That night, as the stars came out over Cedar Ridge, Eleanor sat on her porch with Grizzly beside her. The other bikers had finally gone to sleep. Clara had gone home. The reporters had packed up their cameras and left. It was just the two of them watching the moon rise over the garden. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked. "Now." Grizzly leaned back in his chair. "Now we rebuild. Fix the shed, repair the damage. Make this place better than it was before. And after that," he smiled, "after that we live. That's all any of us can do, Mama Ellie. Just live." Eleanor reached over and took his hand. They sat there in comfortable silence, two people connected by 30 years of history and a love that transcended blood. Somewhere in the darkness, a mockingbird began to sing, and Eleanor Crawford, for the first time since Henry died, felt truly at peace. Eleanor was in her kitchen, washing dishes that didn't need washing, when Deputy Hendricks knocked on her door. The look on his face had told her everything she needed to know before he said a word. "What happened?" she asked. Hendricks took off his hat. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Victor Sloan made bail. Eleanor's hands stopped moving. The dish she was holding slipped into the sink with a clatter. "That's impossible. He tried to burn down my house. He's wanted in 3 states. How can he possibly money?" Hendricks spat the word like a curse. "Someone posted $200,000 in cash. Anonymous donor. Judge had no choice but to release him." "Who has that kind of money?" "That's what I'm trying to find out." Hendricks stepped inside, lowering his voice. "Mrs. Crawford, I don't want to scare you, but Victor didn't act alone. There's someone behind him, someone with deep pockets and connections we haven't figured out yet." Eleanor felt the world tilting beneath her feet. She grabbed the counter to steady herself. "Where is he now?" "That's the problem. He's supposed to stay in the county, wear an ankle monitor, check in daily. But he cut the monitor 2 hours ago. We've got an APB out, but so far nothing. So he's out there, free, after everything he did." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Crawford. I truly am." Eleanor heard footsteps behind her. Grizzly appeared in the doorway, his expression darkening as he read the situation. "He's out," Grizzly said. It wasn't a question. Hendricks nodded. "Made bail this morning, disappeared this afternoon. We're doing everything we can." "Everything you can isn't enough." Grizzly's voice was ice. "Someone's protecting him, someone with enough money to make a $200,000 bail look like pocket change." "I know." Hendricks rubbed his eyes. "I'm working on it. But until we find Victor, I need you to be careful. All of you." He left a few minutes later and the house fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Eleanor stared at the door, her mind racing. "He's coming back," she whispered. "Isn't he?" Grizzly was already on his phone texting his brothers. "He might try, but he won't get close, I promise you that. You can't watch me forever, Rex. You have a life, a club, responsibilities. You are my responsibility." He looked up from his phone. "Until this is over, nothing else matters." Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she couldn't let him put his life on hold for her. But the fear in her chest was too strong, and the words died before they reached her lips. Victor Sloan was out there somewhere, and he wanted her dead. The next morning brought a surprise Eleanor didn't expect. She was sitting on her porch trying to read a book she couldn't focus on when a car pulled up to her curb. Not a police car, not a reporter's van, just an ordinary sedan with rental plates. A woman stepped out, mid-30s professional suit, expensive haircut. She walked toward the porch with the kind of confidence that came from years of getting exactly what she wanted. "Mrs. Crawford." The woman extended her hand. "My name is Diane Chen. I'm a producer with Dateline NBC. I was hoping we could talk." Eleanor didn't take her hand. "I've already talked to enough reporters. I'm not here for a soundbite." Diane lowered her hand, unfazed by the rejection. "I'm here because Victor Sloan is part of something much bigger than you know, and I think you deserve to hear the truth." "What truth?" Diane glanced around. "Can we go inside? This isn't the kind of conversation you want to have on a porch." Eleanor hesitated. Every instinct told her to send this woman away, to close the door and pretend the outside world didn't exist. But something in Diane's eyes held her attention. Something that looked almost like guilt. "Fine," Eleanor said. 5 minutes." They sat in the living room. Eleanor didn't offer coffee or water. She just waited. "Victor Sloan has been running his scam for over 15 years, Diane began. "But he's not the mastermind. He's just a tool, a weapon used by a much more powerful organization." "What organization?" "It's called Cornerstone Properties. On paper, they're a legitimate real estate development company. But underneath, they're a network of fraud, intimidation, and elder abuse that spans half the country." Diane pulled out her phone and showed Eleanor a photograph. A middle-aged man with silver hair and cold eyes standing in front of a corporate logo. "This is Gerald Patterson. He founded Cornerstone 30 years ago. He's worth approximately $800 million. And he's the one who bailed Victor out of jail." Eleanor stared at the photograph. Why would a billionaire care about my house?" "Because your house sits on land that Cornerstone has been trying to acquire for years. They want to build a luxury condo development that would stretch across half of Magnolia Lane. But to do that, they need every property on the block." Diane swiped to another photograph, a map with several houses highlighted. "They've already acquired 6 houses. Yours is the 7th, and you're the only one who didn't sell." "I never received any offer to sell." "That's because they didn't want to buy, they wanted to steal." Diane put down her phone. "This is how Cornerstone works, Mrs. Crawford. They send people like Victor to target vulnerable homeowners, elderly, sick alone, people who can't fight back, people who will eventually give up and walk away." Eleanor felt sick. "How many people has he done this to?" "Documented cases 47, but that's just what we've been able to prove. The real number is probably triple that. And nobody stopped them. We're trying." Diane leaned forward. "That's why I'm here. I've been investigating Cornerstone for 2 years. I have evidence, witnesses, documents, everything I need to bring them down. But I need one more thing." "What, you?" Diane's eyes were intense. "I need you to testify, Mrs. Crawford. On camera, tell your story. Let the world see what these people do to innocent victims." Eleanor's heart was pounding. "And if I do? What happens then?" "Then we blow this thing wide open. Patterson goes to prison. Cornerstone gets shut down. And every victim they've ever hurt gets justice." "And Victor," Diane's expression hardened, "Victor is the key to everything. He knows where the bodies are buried. If we can get him to talk, to turn on Patterson, this whole empire comes crashing down." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The world kept turning, indifferent to the weight of the decision she was being asked to make. "I need to think about it," she finally said. Diane nodded and stood. "I understand. Take all the time you need." She handed Eleanor a business card. "But Mrs. Crawford, time is the one thing we don't have much of. Patterson knows I'm investigating him. He knows Victor is a liability. And people who become liabilities for Gerald Patterson have a way of disappearing." She was gone before Eleanor could respond. Grizzly found her an hour later, still sitting in the same chair staring at the business card in her hands. "Who was that woman?" he asked. Eleanor told him everything. Patterson, Cornerstone, the 47 documented victims, the empire of fraud and abuse that stretched across half the country. By the time she finished, Grizzly's face was carved from stone. "They've been planning this for years," he said quietly. "Your house was never random. It was a target from the beginning." What do I do, Rex? If I testify, become a target. If I don't, they get away with everything. Grizzly sat down across from her. His massive hands rested on his knees, scarred and steady. What would Henry do? The question hit Eleanor like a punch to the chest. She closed her eyes and saw her husband's face. That crooked smile. Those gentle eyes that saw the best in everyone. He would fight, she whispered. He would never let bullies win. Then you have your answer. Eleanor opened her eyes. The fear was still there, coiled in her stomach like a snake. But alongside it was something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Courage. Call Diane Chen, she said. Tell her I'll do the interview. The news hit Gerald Patterson's desk at 3:47 p.m. He was in his corner office on the 42nd floor of the Patterson Tower in Dallas, reviewing quarterly projections when his phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. Dateline producer meeting with Crawford. She's agreed to interview. Patterson set down his reading glasses and stared at the Dallas skyline. He hadn't become a billionaire by panicking at setbacks. He'd become a billionaire by eliminating them. He picked up his desk phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. We have a problem, he said when the line connected. The Cedar Ridge situation is escalating. I saw the news. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. The bikers are making this complicated. The bikers are irrelevant. What concerns me is the Dateline investigation. If that woman gets her story on the air, everything we've built starts to unravel. What do you want me to do? Patterson considered the question carefully. He was a businessman, not a thug. He didn't believe in violence as a first resort. But sometimes when the stakes were high enough, violence became the only option. Victor Sloan is a liability, he said finally. He knows too much. If the authorities get him to talk, I understand. And the producer, Diane Chen, she needs to understand that some stories aren't worth telling. I understand. Patterson hung up without saying goodbye. He turned back to his projections, his mind already moving on to the next problem. In his world, people like Eleanor Crawford were footnotes, inconveniences to be swept aside and forgotten. He would learn too late how wrong he was. Victor Sloan knew he was being hunted. He could feel it in his bones in the way the hair stood up on the back of his neck every time he stepped outside. The police were looking for him. The bikers were looking for him. And now he suspected his own employer was looking for him too. He'd been moving constantly since he cut the ankle monitor. Cheap motels, cash, only never staying in one place longer than a night. But he was running out of money, running out of options, running out of time. His phone rang. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Victor? The voice was familiar. Patterson's head of security, a man named Drake who had no first name and no soul. We need to talk. I'm done talking. You people hung me out to dry. Martinez abandoned me. Patterson left me to rot in jail until someone posted bail. That bail was posted by Mr. Patterson. He's trying to help you, Victor, but you need to come in. Come in, Victor laughed bitterly. So you can put a bullet in my head. I know how this works, Drake. I become a liability. I disappear. That's not save it. Victor's voice hardened. I've got insurance. Everything Patterson's ever done, every operation, every victim, it's all documented. Anything happens to me, it goes straight to the FBI. Silence on the other end. Victor could practically hear Drake calculating. You're bluffing, Drake finally said. Try me. Another pause. Then, Mr. Patterson wants to meet, face to face, work this out like professionals. I don't think so. He's willing to offer compensation. A new identity, a fresh start somewhere far away. South America, maybe. You could live like a king. Victor hesitated. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. But he'd been in this game long enough to know what fresh start really meant. A shallow grave in some jungle where no one would ever find his body. I want $5 million, he said. Cash. Delivered to a location of my choosing. And I want a plane ticket to a country with no extradition treaty. That's a lot of money. It's also a lot of silence. Take it or leave it. Drake sighed. I'll talk to Mr. Patterson. Stay by your phone. The line went dead. Victor sat in the darkness of his motel room, staring at the phone in his hand. He was playing a dangerous game. But dangerous games were the only kind he knew. The Dateline interview was scheduled for the following evening. Diane Chen arrived with a camera crew of 3, all of them professional and discreet. They set up in Eleanor's living room, transforming it into a makeshift studio with lights and microphones and cables snaking across the floor. Grizzly and his brothers watched from outside. They'd swept the property, twice positioned lookouts at every approach turned Eleanor's home into a fortress. If anyone tried to disrupt this interview, they would have to go through a wall of leather and iron first. "Are you ready?" Diane asked as Eleanor settled into her chair. "No," Eleanor admitted, "but I'm going to do it anyway." Diane smiled. "That's the bravest answer I've ever heard." The camera started rolling. Diane asked her first question, and Eleanor began to talk. She talked about Henry, about their life together, their home, their dreams. She talked about the day she came back from her sister's funeral to find strangers in her house. She talked about Victor Sloan's cold smile, about the police who couldn't help, about the system that was supposed to protect her but had failed completely. She talked about the Hells Angels, about Grizzly Morrison, the broken boy who had become her guardian angel, about the men who had dropped everything to protect a woman they barely knew, simply because it was the right thing to do. And she talked about Gerald Patterson, about Cornerstone Properties, about the empire of fraud and abuse that had destroyed countless lives across America. "They target people like me," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Old, alone, vulnerable. People who can't fight back. People society has forgotten." She looked directly into the camera. "But I'm not forgotten, and I'm not giving up. Not on my home, not on my husband's memory, not on the people who need someone to stand up for them." She paused, took a breath, let the words settle. "My name is Eleanor Crawford. I am 76 years old, and I refuse to be a victim." The interview lasted 2 hours. When it was over, Diane sat back with an expression of quiet awe. "That was incredible, Mrs. Crawford. You're going to change so many lives with this story. I just hope it's enough." "It will be." Diane started packing up her equipment. "This airs in 2 weeks. By the time we're done, Gerald Patterson won't be able to hide behind his money anymore." Eleanor walked her to the door. "Thank you for believing in this, for believing in me." "Thank you for being brave." Diane squeezed her hand. "Not everyone would do what you're doing." "I had good teachers." Eleanor glanced at Grizzly, who was standing guard on the porch. "They taught me that running away isn't living. It's just dying slowly." Diane left with her crew. The house fell quiet again. Grizzly came inside and found Eleanor sitting in the chair where she'd given the interview. She looked exhausted but at peace. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also free. For the first time in weeks, I feel like I'm doing something, fighting back instead of just surviving." Grizzly sat down across from her. "Henry would be proud." "I know." Eleanor smiled softly. "I could feel him with me, the whole time, like he was sitting right beside me, whispering in my ear." "What was he saying?" "He was saying, 'That's my girl.'" Grizzly laughed. It was the first real laugh Eleanor had heard from him since this whole nightmare began. The sound of it warmed something deep inside her. "You know," she said, "I never asked you about your family. Before Henry, before the Hells Angels. You must have had someone." The laughter faded from Grizzly's face. He was silent for a long moment, staring at his hands. "I had a mother," he finally said. "Sarah Morrison, sweetest woman you'd ever meet. Worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table after my father left." "What happened to her?" "She got sick. Cancer, same as Henry. I was 12 years old when she died." His voice was flat, emotionless, but Eleanor could see the pain behind his eyes. "After that, I went into the system. Foster homes, group homes, juvenile detention. Every place worse than the last." "I'm so sorry, Rex." "Don't be." He looked up at her. "I made choices, bad choices. Nobody forced me to steal, to fight, to run with the wrong people. That was all on me." He paused. "But meeting Henry, meeting you, that was the first time I understood that I had other options, that I could be something more than what the world expected me to be." Eleanor reached out and took his hand. "You became exactly what she would have wanted. Your mother, I mean. She would have been so proud of the man you are." Grizzly's eyes glistened. He didn't speak, couldn't speak. He just held Eleanor's hand and let the silence say what words could not. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a motorcycle pulling up outside. One of Grizzly's brothers, a man named Tommy Torch Reyes, burst through the door. "We've got a problem," Torch said. Victor Sloan. Someone spotted him at a gas station about 30 miles north. He was with two other men, professional looking, the kind who carry concealed. Grizzly was on his feet instantly. "How long ago?" 20 minutes. They were heading south, toward Cedar Ridge. Eleanor felt the fear come flooding back. "He's coming for me. He's not getting anywhere near you." Grizzly pulled out his phone. "Torch, get the brothers, all of them. I want eyes on every road into this town." "Already done, but there's something else." Torch hesitated. "One of the guys with Victor, I recognized him. Marcus Drake. He's Patterson's head of security. Former special forces. Very dangerous." Grizzly's jaw tightened. "Patterson's making his move." "Looks like it. Then we make ours." Grizzly turned to Eleanor. "I need you to go to Clara's house. Stay there until this is over." "No." Eleanor stood up, surprising even herself. "I'm not running. Not anymore. Mama Ellie, these people are killers. This isn't like before." "I know exactly what they are." Eleanor's voice was steady, fierce. "And I'm still not running. This is my home, my husband's home, and I will not let them drive me out of it again." Grizzly stared at her. He wanted to argue, to force her to safety, to protect her the way he had protected her since the day he arrived. But he saw something in her eyes that stopped him. A fire that hadn't been there before. A strength that came from somewhere deep and unshakable. "Okay," he said quietly. "Then we stand together." Eleanor nodded. Together. The call came at midnight. Eleanor was in her kitchen making coffee for the bikers who had set up a perimeter around her house when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. "Hello, Mrs. Crawford." The voice was smooth, cultured, expensive. "My name is Gerald Patterson. I believe you have heard of me." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. "I know who you are." "Good, then you know what I'm capable of." Patterson's tone was conversational, almost friendly. "I've been watching your interview. Very moving. Very compelling. The kind of thing that could cause a great deal of trouble for me." "That's the idea." Patterson chuckled. "I admire your spirit, Mrs. Crawford. Truly I do. But I think you're making a mistake. This fight you've started, it's not one you can win. The people I employ, the resources at my disposal, you have no idea what you're up against." "I know exactly what I'm up against, and I'm not afraid of you." "You should be." The friendliness drained from Patterson's voice. "I'm offering you a chance, Mrs. Crawford, a final chance to walk away from all of this. Retract your interview, sign a confidentiality agreement, and in return, I'll make sure you're compensated generously. $500,000 free and clear. Enough to buy a new house, start a new life, forget any of this ever happened." Eleanor looked out the window at the bikers standing guard in her yard. At the home she had fought so hard to keep. At the garden where Henry's ashes rested. "No," she said. "I'm sorry. I said no. I'm not taking your money. I'm not signing anything. And I'm not going to stop fighting until you and everyone who works for you is behind bars." Silence on the other end. When Patterson spoke again, his voice was cold as steel. "That's very disappointing, Mrs. Crawford. I had hoped we could resolve this like civilized people." "There's nothing civilized about what you do." "Perhaps not, but it is effective." Patterson paused. "Enjoy your evening, Mrs. Crawford, what's left of it." The line went dead. Eleanor stood there, phone pressed against her chest, heart pounding. She should have been terrified, should have been shaking with fear at the implied threat, but instead she felt something unexpected. Rage. She walked outside and found Grizzly on the porch. "Patterson just called me." Grizzly's eyes went dark. "What did he say?" "He offered me $500,000 to make this go away. When I refused, he threatened me." "Ooh, did he say what he was going to do?" "No, just that I should endure what's left of my evening." Eleanor looked at him steadily. "He's going to try something tonight, isn't he?" "Probably." "Good." Eleanor's voice was harder than Grizzly had ever heard it. "Let him try. Let him send his mercenaries and his killers and his money. I'm not afraid anymore, Rex. I'm not the scared old woman who slept in her car because she had nowhere else to go." "Who are you?" Eleanor smiled. It was not a gentle smile. I'm the woman who's going to bring him down. They came at 300 a.m., 4 vehicles approaching from different directions, headlights off. Professional, coordinated. The kind of operation that spoke of military training and ruthless intent. But they weren't expecting a wall of Hell's Angels waiting for them. The first SUV turned onto Magnolia Lane and found the road blocked by 6 motorcycles and the men who rode them. The driver slammed on the brakes. Grizzly stepped aboard, his massive frame silhouetted by the moonlight. "Turn around," he said calmly. "This street is closed." The SUV's window rolled down. Marcus Drake sat in the passenger seat, his face unreadable. "Mr. Morrison, I was hoping we could avoid this." "Then you shouldn't have come. I have a job to do. Surely you understand. One professional to another." "I understand." Grizzly didn't move. "But here's what you need to understand. That woman in that house is under my protection. You try to get past me, you're not going home tonight." Drake studied him for a long moment. Calculating, evaluating, measuring the odds. "There are 4 of us," Drake said, "all trained, all armed. You're bikers. This isn't your world." "You're wrong about that." Grizzly's voice dropped lower, colder. "This is exactly my world. And in my world, we don't threaten old ladies. We don't burn down homes. We don't destroy lives for money." He took a step forward. "So, I'm going to give you one chance. 1, turn your vehicles around and tell Patterson that Eleanor Crawford is off limits. Forever. And if I don't," Grizzly smiled, it was terrifying, "then you find out why they call me Grizzly." The standoff lasted exactly 11 seconds. Drake's eyes moved from Grizzly to the bikers behind him to the shadows where more shapes lurked. He was good at math. The math didn't work. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is." Grizzly stepped back. "Tell your boss. The game is over. He lost." Drake's jaw tightened. For a moment, it looked like he might give the order anyway. Might choose violence over wisdom, pride over survival. Then he rolled up his window. The SUV backed up slowly. The other vehicles followed, disappearing into the darkness the same way they'd come. Grizzly stood in the middle of the road watching them go. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. But his face showed nothing. When the last vehicle disappeared, he allowed himself to breathe. Behind him, he heard the front door open. Eleanor stood on the porch wrapped in a bathrobe, her eyes wide. "It over?" she asked. Grizzly walked toward her. "For tonight. And tomorrow," he took her hands in his. "Tomorrow we finish this, once and for all." Eleanor looked into his eyes. This man who had been a broken boy, this outlaw who had become her protector, this stranger who had become family. "Together?" she asked. Grizzly nodded. "Together." The sun rose over Cedar Ridge like a promise that couldn't be kept. Eleanor hadn't slept. She'd spent the hours after Drake's retreat sitting at her kitchen table drinking coffee that had gone cold, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. Grizzly found her there at dawn. "You should rest," he said. "I can't." Eleanor wrapped her hands around the cold mug. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Victor's face. Patterson's voice in my ear, those SUVs coming down the street." Grizzly sat down across from her. He looked exhausted too, but the fire in his eyes hadn't dimmed. "They're running scared, Mama Ellie. That's why they came in the middle of the night. That's why Patterson called you himself. They know the walls are closing in. Or they're desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things." Before Grizzly could respond, his phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. "Unknown number. Don't answer it." "I have to." He pressed the button. "Who is this?" The voice that came through was the last one he expected to hear. "Morrison, it's Victor Sloan." Grizzly's face went hard as stone. "Where are you? Somewhere safe for now." Victor's voice sounded different, strained, scared. "I need to talk, face to face. Just you and me." "Why would I do that?" "Because I have information that can bring Patterson down. All of it. Every crime, every victim, every body." Victor paused. "I'm willing to turn state's evidence, but I need protection, the kind the police can't give me." Grizzly was silent for a long moment. Eleanor watched him, her heart pounding. "How do I know this isn't a trap?" "You don't." Victor laughed bitterly. "But think about it, Morrison. What do I have to gain by trapping you? Patterson wants me dead. The police want me in prison. The only chance I have is to burn the whole thing down and hope I can cut a deal. Where do you want to meet? The old mill on Route 7. You know it. I know it. 1 hour. Come alone. If I see anyone else, I'm gone. The line went dead. Eleanor grabbed Grizzly's arm. You can't go. It's too dangerous. I have to. Grizzly stood up. If Victor's telling the truth, he could give us everything we need. Patterson, Cornerstone, the whole network. We could end this today. And if he's lying, Grizzly looked at her with eyes that had seen too much violence, too much betrayal, too much death. Then I'll handle it, what is. Rex, please. Mama Ellie. He took her hands in his. I've spent 30 years running from who I used to be. From the violence, the anger, the darkness. But sometimes the only way to protect the people you love is to walk straight into that darkness and face it head on. What if you don't come back? Then you keep fighting, you tell your story, you bring Patterson down. He squeezed her hands. But I am coming back, I promise you that. He was gone before she could say another word. The old mill had been abandoned for decades, a relic of a time when Cedar Ridge had been a manufacturing hub instead of a quiet retirement community. Now it was just crumbling walls and rusted machinery, forgotten by everyone except teenagers looking for a place to drink and criminals looking for a place to hide. Grizzly parked his bike 100 yards from the entrance. He walked the rest of the way on foot, his boots crunching on gravel, his senses alert for any sign of ambush. Victor was waiting inside. He looked terrible. Unshaven, hollow-eyed clothes wrinkled from days of running. The arrogant man who had stolen Eleanor's home was gone. In his place was someone broken, desperate, terrified. You came alone, Victor said. It wasn't a question. You said to come alone. I didn't think you'd actually do it. Victor laughed nervously. The great Grizzly Morrison trusting the word of a con man. I'm not here because I trust you. I'm here because I need what you have. Grizzly stopped 10 feet away. Talk. Victor reached into his jacket. Grizzly's hand moved toward his belt, but Victor held up a USB drive. Everything's on here. Financial records, property transfers, victim lists. Communications between me and Patterson going back 10 years. He tossed the drive to Grizzly. That's your smoking gun. That's your proof. Grizzly caught it without looking. Why are you doing this? Because Patterson sent Drake to kill me last night. Victor's voice cracked. After everything I did for him, after all the dirty work, all the lives I destroyed, he threw me away like garbage. And you thought I'd feel sorry for you. I don't expect you to feel anything for me. Victor's eyes met Grizzly's. But I want you to understand something. I wasn't always like this. I wasn't born evil. I was born poor. Desperate. Forgotten. The system that was supposed to help people like me just pushed me further down. He gestured around him. This is what happens when society gives up on you. You become what they expect you to be. A monster. You had choices. Did I? Victor shook his head. You had Henry Crawford. You had someone who believed in you, who saw something worth saving. I never had that. Not once in my entire life. Grizzly was silent. The words hit closer to home than he wanted to admit. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Victor continued. I'm asking for a chance to make it right. Help me bring Patterson down. Let me testify. Let me tell the world what he really is. And what do you want in return? Protection. Until the trial. After that, Victor shrugged. I'll take whatever punishment the court gives me. I'm done running. Grizzly studied him for a long moment. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. That Victor Sloan was exactly the kind of man who would say anything, do anything to save his own skin. But there was something in his eyes, something that looked almost like sincerity. If you're lying to me, Grizzly said slowly, I will find you and there won't be a trial. I know. Then we have a deal. He turned and walked toward the door. He was almost outside when Victor's voice stopped him. Morrison. Grizzly paused. Tell Mrs. Crawford I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything. But tell her anyway. Grizzly didn't respond. He just kept walking. Deputy Hendricks was waiting at Eleanor's house when Grizzly returned. We've got a problem, Hendricks said before Grizzly could even take off his helmet. Patterson's lawyers filed an injunction this morning. They're trying to block the Dateline broadcast. On what grounds? Defamation, privacy violations, every BS legal trick in the book. Hendricks ran a hand through his hair. The network's lawyers are fighting it, but if Patterson gets the right judge, he could delay the broadcast for months. Maybe kill it entirely. Grizzly pulled out the USB drive. What if I told you I have something that changes everything? Hendricks stared at the drive. Where did you get that? Victor Sloan. He wants to turn state's evidence. Victor, Hendricks' eyes widened. He's willing to testify against Patterson. He's willing to do whatever it takes to stay alive. And right now, bringing down Patterson is the only way to do that. Hendricks took the drive carefully as if it might explode. If this is real, if this contains what you say it contains, then Patterson is finished. Hendricks looked at him. We need to get this to the FBI today, before Patterson's people realize it exists. Do it. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. She looked at Grizzly with a mixture of relief and fear. You're okay, she said quietly. I'm okay. He walked toward her. And it's almost over, Mama Ellie. One way or another, it's almost over. The FBI arrived in Cedar Ridge 4 hours later. 2 black SUVs, 6 agents, and a level of firepower that made even the Hells Angels look underprepared. The lead agent was a woman named Patricia Santos, mid-40s, with eyes that had seen every kind of evil humanity had to offer. She sat across from Eleanor in the living room reviewing documents, asking questions, building a case. Mrs. Crawford, I want you to understand what we're dealing with here. Gerald Patterson has connections at the highest levels of government. Senators, judges, maybe even higher. Taking him down wouldn't be easy. I don't care about easy, Eleanor said. I care about right. Santos smiled. It was the first time Eleanor had seen any warmth in her expression. That's exactly what I needed to hear. What happens now? Now we move fast. The evidence on that USB drive is substantial, but we need corroborating testimony. Victor Sloan's statement will help, but it's not enough on its own. Santos leaned forward. We need more victims to come forward. People who can testify to what Cornerstone did to them. How many? As many as we can find. The more voices, the harder it is for Patterson's lawyers to dismiss this as a vendetta. Eleanor thought about the 47 documented cases Diane Chen had mentioned. 47 families destroyed. 47 lives ruined. 47 people who had been too afraid, too broken, too alone to fight back. I'll find them, she said. Santos raised an eyebrow. How, by telling my story, by showing them they're not alone anymore. Eleanor stood up straighter. I spent weeks feeling helpless, hopeless, like there was nothing I could do against people with so much power. But I was wrong. The power was always there. I just had to find it. Santos studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Diane Chen's broadcast is scheduled for next week. If Patterson's injunction fails, it could reach tens of millions of viewers. That might be enough to bring more victims out of the shadows. Then we make sure the injunction fails. Easier said than done. Patterson's lawyers are very good. So are we. Eleanor looked at Grizzly, at Hendricks, at the FBI agents filling her home. We have something Patterson doesn't have. We have the truth, and we have each other. Gerald Patterson received the news at 7:43 p.m. He was in his private office at Patterson Tower when his phone rang. His personal attorney, a man who cost $1,500 an hour and was worth every penny. Gerald, we have a problem. The FBI seized Victor Sloan this afternoon. He's in protective custody and cooperating fully. Patterson's grip tightened on the phone. How much does he know? Everything, every operation, every transaction, every victim. He kept records, Gerald, detailed records. That was supposed to be impossible. We had safeguards. The safeguards failed. Victor was more careful than we realized. The attorney paused. Gerald, I have to be honest with you. This is bad, very bad. The evidence he's providing could implicate you in dozens of federal crimes. There's fraud, extortion, conspiracy, elder abuse. If this goes to trial, it won't go to trial. Gerald, I said it won't go to trial. Patterson's voice was ice. I've spent 40 years building this empire. I'm not going to let some con artist and an old woman tear it down. What do you want me to do? Patterson stared out at the Dallas skyline, the city he owned, the world he controlled, everything he had sacrificed, everything he had built, everything he had become. Get me Drake, he said. We're accelerating the timeline. Gerald violence isn't just get me Drake. He hung up and turned back to the window. His reflection stared back at him, a man who had clawed his way up from nothing, who had crushed every obstacle in his path, who had never accepted defeat. He wasn't about to start now. The call came to Eleanor at midnight. She was half asleep, dreaming of Henry, when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She answered without thinking. Hello, Mrs. Crawford. The voice was young, female, trembling with fear. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I saw your interview on the news. The preview, I mean, before the broadcast. Eleanor sat up instantly awake. Sarah, are you okay? I don't know. I'm scared, but I had to call. Sarah's voice broke. They did the same thing to my mother. Cornerstone. Victor Sloan. They took her house 3 years ago. She died in a nursing home 6 months later. Alone. Eleanor's heart shattered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. I was so angry, so helpless. But then I saw you on TV and I thought, maybe I'm not alone. Maybe there are others like me. There are, Eleanor's voice was firm. There are many others, and we're going to fight together. How do we fight someone like Patterson? By telling the truth, by standing up, by refusing to be invisible anymore. Eleanor got out of bed. Sarah, I want you to call the FBI. Ask for Agent Patricia Santos. Tell her everything that happened to your mother. Can you do that? I think so. You can. I know you can, because you're braver than you realize. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then thank you, Mrs. Crawford. Thank you for giving me hope. Thank you for calling. You just gave me something too. After she hung up, Eleanor stood at her window looking out at the night. Somewhere out there, Sarah Mitchell was gathering her courage. Somewhere out there, other victims were watching the news, wondering if they had the strength to come forward. They did. They just didn't know it yet. Eleanor would show them. The next 72 hours were chaos. The FBI's investigation accelerated rapidly. Victor Sloan's testimony, combined with the evidence on the USB drive, painted a picture of criminal enterprise that stretched across decades and state lines. Patterson's lawyers fought back with every weapon at their disposal, but the tide was turning. More importantly, the victims began to emerge. Sarah Mitchell was the first, a 34-year-old nurse from Oklahoma who had watched helplessly as her mother's home was stolen and her spirit broken. She gave a tearful statement to the FBI, then agreed to be interviewed by Diane Chen. After Sarah came Robert Thornton, 67 years old, a retired firefighter from Arkansas whose wife had died of a stroke 3 weeks after losing their home. He blamed himself, said he should have fought harder, should have protected her. Then came Maria Gonzalez, James Wilson, the Patterson family from Louisiana, no relation to Gerald. Victim after victim, story after story, a chorus of suffering that demanded to be heard. By the end of the week, 43 of the 47 documented victims had come forward. Some were alive and willing to testify. Others had passed away, but their families spoke in their place. The momentum was unstoppable. Patterson's injunction hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. If the judge ruled in his favor, the Dateline broadcast would be delayed indefinitely. If he ruled against Patterson, the story would air that same night. Everything came down to one courtroom. One judge, one decision. The courtroom was packed. Eleanor sat in the front row, flanked by Grizzly on one side and Clara on the other. Behind them, the gallery was filled with victims, supporters, and members of the press. The weight of their collective hope was almost physical. Patterson's legal team sat at one table, a small army of expensive suits and cold expressions. At the other table sat Diane Chen's lawyers, along with representatives from the FBI and the Texas Attorney General's office. The judge entered at exactly 9:00 a.m. The Honorable Michael Reeves, 70 years old, 35 years on the bench, a reputation for fairness that had survived countless attempts to compromise it. Everyone rose. Everyone sat. The hearing began. Patterson's lead attorney spoke first. Your Honor, this broadcast represents a calculated campaign of defamation against a respected businessman. The allegations are based on unverified claims from unreliable witnesses, including a convicted criminal seeking to reduce his own sentence. We respectfully request that this court issue an injunction to prevent irreparable harm to Mr. Patterson's reputation. Judge Reeves nodded. Counselor, your response. The lawyer for Dateline stood. Your Honor, the evidence we have gathered is not only verified but overwhelming. 43 victims have come forward with corroborating testimony. Financial records, communications, and physical evidence all support our reporting. This is not defamation. This is journalism, and the public has a right to know the truth. The arguments went back and forth for nearly an hour. Technical legal points, constitutional questions, precedents from cases that had been decided before Eleanor was born. Through it all, Eleanor watched Judge Reeves. His face was unreadable, giving nothing away. But his eyes moved constantly, taking in the victims in the gallery, the lawyers at the tables, the weight of the moment. Finally, the arguments ended. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Reeves took a deep breath. I've heard the arguments from both sides. I've reviewed the evidence, and I've considered the stakes both for Mr. Patterson and for the public interest. He paused. Eleanor's heart stopped. Freedom of the press is not absolute, but neither is the right to suppress uncomfortable truths. The evidence presented suggests that the reporting in question is based on substantial documentation and credible witnesses. Another pause. The silence was deafening. The motion for injunction is denied. The broadcast may proceed. The courtroom exploded. Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. Clara was hugging her. Grizzly was standing behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his presence solid and real. Across the room, Patterson's lawyers were already on their phones, undoubtedly plotting their next move. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. The truth was coming out, and nothing could stop it. The broadcast aired at 8:00 p.m. on Friday night. Eleanor watched it from her living room, surrounded by the people who had become her family. Grizzly and his brothers, Clara, Deputy Hendricks, Agent Santos, Diane Chen, who had arrived just before airtime to watch with them. For 2 hours, the story unfolded. Eleanor's ordeal, Victor's confession, the parade of victims who had suffered in silence for so long, and finally the evidence that linked it all to Gerald Patterson and Cornerstone Properties. The response was immediate. Social media exploded. Phone lines at the FBI tip hotline crashed from the volume of calls. News outlets around the world picked up the story. By the time the credits rolled, Eleanor knew that everything had changed. Her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. Hello, Mrs. Crawford. The voice was tired, defeated, old. This is Gerald Patterson. Eleanor felt her breath catch. What do you want? I wanted you to know that you won. Not the FBI, not the lawyers, you. He laughed bitterly. A 76-year-old widow. You brought down everything I spent 40 years building. You brought yourself down. I just shined a light on it. Perhaps. Patterson was silent for a moment. I underestimated you, Mrs. Crawford. I looked at you and saw a victim. A mark. Someone to be exploited and forgotten. I didn't see a fighter. Most people don't. No, they don't. Another pause. I'm going to prison, probably for the rest of my life. But before I go, I wanted you to know something. What? I'm sorry, not for the reasons you might think. I'm sorry because I could have been different. I could have used my resources to help people instead of hurt them. I could have been someone my family was proud of. His voice broke slightly. Instead, I chose power, and power corrupted everything it touched. Eleanor didn't know what to say. This was the man who had tried to destroy her, who had sent people to intimidate her, to burn her home, to silence her forever. And now he was apologizing. I can't forgive you, she finally said. Not for what you did to me, not for what you did to all those people. I know. But I can tell you this, it's never too late to change, even now, even after everything. You can choose to be different. Patterson was silent for a long time. Perhaps, he said again. Perhaps. The line went dead. Eleanor set down her phone and looked around the room, at the people who had saved her, at the home she had fought so hard to keep, at the life she had almost lost. Who was that? Grizzly asked. Patterson. She took a deep breath. It's over. It's really over. Grizzly crossed the room and took her hands. You did it, Mama Ellie. You brought down an empire. We did it, all of us. Together. Clara raised her coffee cup. To Eleanor, the bravest woman I've ever known. The others joined in. Grizzly, Hendricks, Santos, Diane, the bikers who had become her protectors. To Eleanor. She looked at their faces filled with love and admiration and respect, and she thought about Henry, about what he would say if he could see her now. "That's my girl," she whispered to herself. That night, after everyone had gone home, Eleanor walked out to the garden. The shed was still gone, destroyed by Victor's fire, but the garden itself had survived. The flowers Henry had planted decades ago still bloomed. The soil where she had scattered his ashes still held him close. She knelt down and pressed her hand against the earth. "I wish you could have seen it," she said softly. "Everything that happened, everyone who helped, you would have been so proud." The wind rustled through the trees. The stars burned silently overhead. "I'm not scared anymore, Henry. I'm not alone. I found a family, a purpose, a reason to keep going." She smiled through her tears, "All because you taught me that kindness matters, that the helping people matters, that love is the most powerful force in the world." She stayed there for a long time, communing with the man she had loved for 54 years. The man who had saved a broken boy and set in motion a chain of events that would save her. When she finally stood up, her knees ached and her back protested. But her heart was full. "Good night, Henry," she whispered. "I love you." She walked back inside, leaving the garden to the darkness and the memory of a love that would never die. The phone was ringing when she entered the kitchen. Eleanor frowned. It was almost midnight. Who would be calling at this hour? She answered. "Hello. Mrs. Crawford." The voice was female, urgent, frightened. "This is Sarah Mitchell. I'm sorry to call so late, but something's happened." "What is it?" "Victor Sloan. He escaped from FBI custody 2 hours ago." Sarah's voice trembled. "And Mrs. Crawford? He's heading back to Cedar Ridge." Eleanor's hand trembled as she held the phone to her ear. "How did he escape?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "The FBI is still figuring that out," Sarah said. "Someone on the inside helped him. They're saying Patterson had people everywhere. Patterson is in custody. He can't. His network isn't. Not all of it." Sarah's voice dropped lower. "Mrs. Crawford, I'm scared. If Victor is coming back to Cedar Ridge, he's not coming to apologize." Eleanor looked out the window at the darkness beyond. Somewhere out there, Victor Sloan was moving toward her. The man who had stolen her home, tried to burn it down, and nearly destroyed her life. He was coming back to finish what he started. "Thank you for warning me, Sarah. Stay safe." "You too, Mrs. Crawford. Please." Eleanor hung up and immediately called Grizzly. He answered on the second ring. "Mama Ellie, what's wrong?" "Victor escaped. He's coming here." Silence. Then when? "Sarah Mitchell just called 2 hours ago. If he's driving, he could be here by dawn." Grizzly's voice hardened. "I'm on my way. Don't open the door for anyone. Anyone." "Rex, I mean it. Lock everything. Stay away from windows. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Eleanor stood alone in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she had made coffee for Henry every morning for 50 years. The same kitchen where she had fed a broken young man named Rex Morrison all those years ago. The same kitchen where she had almost lost everything. She walked to the door and locked it. Then she went to every window, checking the latches, pulling the curtains closed. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. Victor Sloan wanted to destroy her, wanted to silence her forever, wanted to erase the woman who had brought down his empire. But Eleanor Crawford was done being a victim. She walked to the closet where Henry had kept his old shotgun. She hadn't touched it since he died, hadn't even looked at it, but now she pulled it out, checked to make sure it was loaded, and carried it back to the living room. If Victor came through that door, she would be ready. Grizzly arrived 18 minutes later. He wasn't alone. 6 of his brothers were with him, their motorcycles thundering down Magnolia Lane like an army responding to a call to war. They spread out across the property, immediately taking positions, watching every approach. Grizzly found Eleanor sitting in her living room, the shotgun across her lap. He stopped in the doorway. "Mama Ellie, don't tell me to put it down." "I wasn't going to." He sat across from her. "I was going to ask if you know how to use it." "Henry taught me 40 years ago." She looked at the weapon in her hands. "I never thought I'd need to." "You might not. We're here. Nothing's getting through." Victor got through the FBI, professional agents with training and resources. "What makes you think because we're not protecting a witness?" Grizzly's voice was fierce. We're protecting family, and there's nothing on this earth that's going to stop us. Eleanor met his eyes. The fear was still there, coiled in her stomach, but alongside it was something else. Trust, faith, love. "Okay, wait," she said quietly. "Okay." The hours crept by in silence. Clara came over around 200 a.m., refusing to stay home alone while danger lurked. She sat with Eleanor in the kitchen, making tea. Neither of them drank, talking about nothing and everything. "You know what I keep thinking about," Clara said. "That day I found you sleeping in your car. I was so angry. Not at you, at the world, at the injustice of it all. You saved me that day," Eleanor said. "You in that lockbox. I found a phone number. You made the call." Clara shook her head. "You did the hard part, Eleanor. You always did. I almost gave up so many times. But you didn't. That's what matters." Deputy Hendricks arrived at 3:30 a.m. with news. "We've got reports of a stolen vehicle heading south on Route 7. Matches the description of the car Victor took. He's maybe 30 minutes out." Grizzly stood up from his position by the window. "How many in the car?" "Just one. He's alone." "That's stupid. Coming alone against all of us? Unless he's not planning to fight." Hendrick's expression was troubled. "Victor's a survivor. He knows he can't win a direct confrontation. So why is he coming?" The question hung in the air. Nobody had an answer. Eleanor's phone rang. Unknown number. Her blood ran cold. "Answer it," Grizzly said, "but put it on speaker." She did. "Mrs. Crawford." Victor's voice filled the room. He sounded calm, almost peaceful. "I see you've got your army assembled. Very impressive." "Where are you, Victor?" "Close. Very close." He laughed softly. "Don't worry. I'm not coming to hurt you. Those days are over." "Then why are you coming?" "Because I need you to understand something before this ends." Victor paused. "I've done terrible things, Mrs. Crawford. Destroyed lives, stolen futures, crushed people like you under my boot without a second thought. I told myself it was survival, that the world owed me, that I was just taking what should have been mine." Eleanor listened in silence. Around her, the bikers had stopped moving, caught by the unexpected tone in Victor's voice. "But you showed me something. When you refused to break, when you stood up and fought back, when you brought down Patterson with nothing but the truth." His voice cracked slightly. "You showed me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that destroys, the kind that endures." "Victor, where are you?" "I'm at the old mill, where Morrison and I talked." Victor took a breath. "I'm not coming to your house, Mrs. Crawford. I'm not going to hurt anyone else. I just wanted to say goodbye." Eleanor's heart stopped. "Victor, what are you?" "I called the FBI before I called you, told them where to find me. They'll be here in about 10 minutes. He laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "I'm turning myself in. For real this time. No deals, no protection. Just justice." Grizzly grabbed the phone. "Why should we believe you?" "Because I'm tired, Morrison. I'm tired of running, tired of lying, tired of being the monster everyone expects me to be." Victor's voice dropped to a whisper. "Your Mama Ellie showed me that even monsters can change. Maybe it's too late for me. Probably it is. But I want to try." Silence stretched across the line. Eleanor looked at Grizzly, who looked at Hendricks, who looked at his phone. "FBI confirms," Hendricks said quietly. "They've got units converging on the old mill. Victor Sloan is surrendering." Eleanor took the phone back. "Victor?" "Yes, Mrs. Crawford. What you did to me, to all those people. I can't forgive that. I may never forgive it." "I know. But what you're doing now, choosing to face the consequences, choosing to stop running." She took a breath. "That takes courage. Real courage." Victor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you, Mrs. Crawford, for seeing something in me, even after everything. Thank Henry. He's the one who taught me how. Maybe I'll get the chance. Someday." Victor paused. "Goodbye, Mrs. Crawford. Take care of yourself. And take care of that family of yours. They're good people." The line went dead. Eleanor set down the phone and looked around the room. Clara was crying. Hendricks was staring at his phone in disbelief. Grizzly was standing by the window, his expression unreadable. Is it over? Clara whispered. Is it finally over? Grizzly turned to face them. His eyes were glistening. Yeah, he said quietly. It's over. The sun rose over Cedar Ridge 2 hours later. Eleanor stood on her porch watching the light spread across the sky. The bikers were still there, scattered across her lawn, but the tension had drained out of them. They laughed quietly among themselves, shared coffee, exchanged stories. Grizzly appeared beside her. He looked exhausted, but there was a peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before. FBI confirmed Victor's in custody, he said. For good this time. No bail, no escape. He's cooperating fully. And Patterson. His lawyers are scrambling, but it's over. The evidence from Victor combined with everything else is airtight. He's looking at multiple life sentences. Eleanor nodded slowly. It didn't feel real. After everything, the terror, the fire, the midnight phone calls and armed standoffs, it was over. Just like that. What happens now? She asked. Grizzly smiled. Now you live, Mama Ellie. That's what happens. You live. The next few weeks passed in a blur of healing and restoration. The community of Cedar Ridge, which had watched Eleanor's ordeal from the sidelines, finally stepped forward. Neighbors who had been too afraid to help during the crisis now showed up with casseroles and tools and offers of assistance. The garden shed was rebuilt bigger and better than before. The scorch marks on the house were painted over. The mailbox Victor had smashed was replaced with a beautiful new one that a local craftsman made by hand. And everywhere Eleanor went, people stopped to thank her. You gave us hope, said Maria Gonzalez, one of Patterson's victims, when she came to visit. All those years, I thought we were alone, that nobody cared what happened to people like us. But you proved me wrong. You gave yourselves hope, Eleanor replied. You came forward, you told your stories, you stood up. Because you showed us how. The Dateline special won an Emmy. Diane Chen called Eleanor to tell her the news, her voice breaking with emotion. This doesn't happen, Diane said. Stories like this, they usually get buried. The powerful protect the powerful. But you changed that. You changed everything. I had help. You had courage. The help came because of the courage. Agent Santos stopped by a month after the arrest to give Eleanor an update. Patterson was cooperating now, giving up names and networks in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence. The dismantling of Cornerstone Properties had revealed corruption that stretched into state governments, law enforcement agencies, even a sitting congressman. We're going to be cleaning this up for years, Santos said, but the foundation is broken, thanks to you. What about the victims? Eleanor asked. The 47 families, will they get justice? They'll get compensation. A fund has been established from Patterson's seized assets. It won't fix what happened to them, but it's something. Santos paused. And they'll get closure. Knowing the people who hurt them are behind bars, that matters too. Eleanor thought about Sarah Mitchell, about Robert Thornton, about all the faces she had seen in the courtroom and on television, the survivors who had found their voices. It does matter, she said. It matters more than anything. Spring came to Cedar Ridge. Eleanor was in her garden planting flowers for the first time since Henry died when she heard the familiar rumble of motorcycle engines. She looked up to see Grizzly and 3 of his brothers rolling down Magnolia Lane. She stood up, brushing dirt from her knees as Grizzly dismounted and walked toward her. He was carrying something in his hands. A small wooden box carefully crafted with an inscription she couldn't read from this distance. What's this? She asked. Grizzly handed her the box. A gift from all of us. Eleanor looked at the inscription. Her breath caught. For Mama Ellie, our family, our heart, our home. She opened the box. Inside was a bronze key on a leather cord. The key was old antique, clearly meant for something ceremonial rather than functional. I don't understand, she said. It's a symbol, Grizzly explained. In our world, we have rituals, ways of honoring the people who matter most. That key represents something sacred. It means you're one of us, forever. No matter where we go, no matter what happens, you will always have a home with the hellsangels. Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Grizzly pulled her into a gentle hug. You just have to know that you're loved, that you'll never be alone again. She held on to him, this man who had once been a broken boy, and let the tears come. Behind them, the other bikers watched in respectful silence. These rough men, these outcasts, these supposed criminals, they had become the family she never expected. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." "Thank you," Grizzly replied, "for showing me what family really means." The summer passed in peace. Eleanor fell into a new routine. Mornings in the garden, tending the flowers that bloomed brighter than they had in years. Afternoons with Clara talking about everything and nothing. Evenings on the porch watching the sunset over the town that had become her battleground and her triumph. And every few weeks without fail, the rumble of motorcycles would announce the arrival of her extended family. Grizzly would stay for dinner. The others would help with whatever needed fixing around the house. They'd share stories and laughter and memories of Henry, the man who had started it all. The letters came too, dozens of them, then hundreds, from survivors of elder abuse across the country. From families who had lost loved ones to predatory schemes, from people who had watched Eleanor's story and found the courage to fight their own battles. She read every one, and she answered as many as she could, offering words of encouragement, advice, hope. "You're becoming a symbol," Clara told her one afternoon, the grandmother who fought back. "I'm just a woman who refused to give up." That's exactly what a symbol is. On the 1-year anniversary of her ordeal, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from the Texas state legislature. Eleanor opened it with trembling hands, expecting another commendation or certificate of appreciation. She'd received several already, but this was different. "Dear Mrs. Crawford," the letter read, "we are pleased to inform you that the Texas legislature has passed the Eleanor Crawford Elder Protection Act, designed to strengthen protections for elderly homeowners and close the legal loopholes exploited by predatory squatters. This legislation, which will take effect on January 1st, will prevent countless families from experiencing the trauma you endured. Your courage and perseverance made this possible. On behalf of the people of Texas, thank you." Eleanor sat down slowly, the letter in her hands. She read it again and again. A law. They had named a law after her, a law that would protect people like her for generations to come. She thought about everything she had been through, the terror of finding strangers in her home, the humiliation of sleeping in her car, the despair of thinking she had lost everything, and then the journey back, the help she never expected, the strength she didn't know she had. All of it had led to this, not just justice for herself, but protection for others, a legacy that would outlive her. "Oh, Henry," she whispered, looking up at the ceiling. "Can you believe it?" In the silence of her living room, she could almost hear his voice. "I always believed in you, Ellie. Always." The final gathering happened on a Sunday in September. Eleanor had invited everyone: Grizzly and his brothers, Clara and her family, Deputy Hendricks and his wife, Agent Santos, who had become a friend, Diane Chen, who was working on a follow-up documentary, Sarah Mitchell and Robert Thornton, and a dozen other survivors who had become like extended family. They filled her backyard, these people who had come together because of tragedy and stayed together because of love. The smell of barbecue filled the air. Children ran through the grass. Laughter echoed off the walls of the house she had almost lost. Eleanor stood on her back porch, watching it all, her heart full to bursting. Grizzly appeared beside her. He was holding 2 glasses of lemonade. "Made it myself," he said, handing her one. "Used your recipe." Eleanor took a sip. It was perfect, exactly the way she had taught him all those years ago. "You remembered." "I remember everything." He looked out at the crowd. "This is beautiful, Mama Ellie. All these people, all this wing, and it started with you. It started with Henry, with kindness, with a meal offered to a hungry young man. That too." Grizzly was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about something, about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "But the club is expanding. We're setting up a new program. Outreach to elderly home owners, helping them protect their properties, connecting them with legal resources." He smiled. "We're calling it the Crawford Initiative." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You're naming it after me. You showed us what we could be, not just enforcers or protectors, but advocates, people who use our strength to help others." Grizzly turned to face her. "That's your legacy, Mama Ellie. Not just surviving, but inspiring. Not just fighting back, but building something better." Eleanor didn't know what to say, so she did the only thing that felt right. She hugged him, this man who had saved her life and become her son in every way that mattered. "I'm so proud of you, Rex," she whispered. "So incredibly proud." "I know." His voice was thick. "I feel the same way about you." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Eleanor gathered everyone around her. She had something to say. They formed a circle in the garden where Henry's ashes rested, the garden that had been touched by fire and restored by love. Eleanor stood in the center, looking at the faces of the people who had become her family. "I want to thank all of you," she began, "for what you've done, for who you are, for showing me that even in the darkest moments there is light." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "A year ago I was alone, afraid, convinced that my life was over. I had lost my husband, my home, my hope. I thought the world had forgotten about people like me. That kindness was just a memory." Well, her voice grew stronger. "But I was wrong. Kindness is not a memory. It is a choice we make every single day. It is the meal we share with a stranger, the hand we offer to someone who has fallen, the courage to stand up when everyone tells us to sit down." She looked at Grizzly. 30 years ago, my husband saw something in a broken young man. He chose to help when no one else would. That choice saved a life. And that life, that boy who became a man, he saved mine." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't care. "That's what I want you to remember. Not the fear, not the fire, not the men who tried to destroy us. I want you to remember that kindness has power, that one small act of compassion can echo across decades, that the love we give comes back to us in ways we never expect." She spread her arms to encompass them all. "You are my proof, every single one of you. Proof that family is not just blood. Proof that courage is not just strength. Proof that no matter how dark the night becomes, the dawn always comes." She took a breath. "Henry used to say that the world is full of people waiting for permission to be good. They see suffering and they want to help, but they're afraid. Afraid of getting involved, afraid of making things worse, afraid of standing alone." Her voice rang out across the garden. "I'm here to tell you that you are not alone. You were never alone. Every one of us has the power to change someone's life. Every one of us can be the person who shows up when no one else will. Every one of us can be the reason someone keeps fighting." She lowered her arms and smiled through her tears. "So don't wait. Don't hesitate. Don't tell yourself it's someone else's job. When you see someone suffering, help them. When you see injustice, fight it. When you see someone who has lost hope, give them yours." She looked at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Henry, if you're listening, I did it. We did it. And I promise you we're not done. Not by a long shot." She turned back to her family. "Now, who wants dessert?" The laughter that followed was the sweetest sound Eleanor had ever heard. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the dishes had been washed and the house had fallen quiet, Eleanor sat alone on her porch. The bronze key hung around her neck, warm against her skin. The stars burned overhead, eternal and untroubled. She thought about everything she had been through, the broke and the sorrow, the fear and the triumph, the love she had lost and the love she had found. She thought about Henry, who had taught her that kindness was never wasted. She thought about Grizzly, who had shown her that redemption was always possible. She thought about all the people who had come together to save her and all the people who would be saved because of what they had built. And she smiled. The house behind her was solid and warm, filled with memories and hope. The garden was blooming, vibrant with life. The community that had once ignored her now embraced her as one of their own. She had lost everything and found something greater. She had been broken and become stronger than she ever thought possible. She had been alone and discovered a family that spanned generations and miles, and all the boundaries society tried to build between people. Eleanor Crawford, 77 years old, widow survivor, and grandmother to a legion of leather-clad warriors, leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, more people to help, more battles to fight. But tonight she rested. Tonight she was at peace. And somewhere out there, roaring down highways across America, were men and women who would drop everything to protect her. Not because she was weak, but because she was worth protecting. Not because she needed saving, but because she had saved them first. That was her legacy. That was her triumph. That was her victory. And it would last forever. Because kindness is never forgotten. Because family is more than blood. Because one small act of love can change the world. And because Eleanor Crawford proved that no matter how old you are, no matter how alone you feel, no matter how powerful your enemies become, you are never too small to fight back. You are never too weak to make a difference. You are never too late to become exactly who you were meant to be.